Good evening and welcome. Today is Monday, March 28th, 2022, and you are joined here at the Transportation Commission meeting, and we are all joined virtually. My name is Bridget Obikoya, and I am the Transportation Commission staff liaison. This meeting is being recorded, so please turn off your microphones if you are not speaking. Before we start with the agenda items, are there any citizen comments on matters not on the agenda? Okay, hearing none, I will turn the meeting over to Chairman Slack with the first agenda item. And it is the Clarendon Sector Plan update. It is an action item. And the lead speaker is Brett Wallace.
Great, thank you. I have no specific things before we get started. So take it away, Mr. Waltz.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Happy to be here. Let me go ahead and pull up my screen. I'll pull up my presentation. Okay, are you seeing my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. Good, thank you. So yeah, again, my name is Brett Wallace. I'm with Arlington County's Planning Department. I've been leading the Clarendon Sector Plan update process over the past 2 years. So I'm here tonight to provide a presentation as we lead towards final adoption by the Planning Commission and County Board in April. So just a quick overview of the presentation. I'll just provide a quick overview of the study background and context. I'll jump right into some of the proposed updates to the sector plan. I'll briefly touch on the GLUP map and booklet amendments, as well as the zoning ordinance amendments before concluding with staff recommendations. So starting with the sector plan study update overview, the objective of the study was really to consider focused updates to guidance that was in the 2006 sector plan, including zoning ordinance regulations. And staff really felt this was a great opportunity to review planning issues holistically rather than site by site prior to any project-specific review processes such as SPRC, PFRC, or park master plans. Staff also thought this was a good opportunity to look at potential refinements to detailed recommendations that are within sites within the specific study area, and looking at evaluating how conditions and assumptions have changed since 2006, including public facility and public park needs. The study did not revisit the vision statement from 2006, the overarching goals, or the framework elements. Some of the plan elements that were evaluated included land uses for private redevelopment within the study area, building height and form, transportation, including new street locations.
Brett, you're muted.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. Did that just happen?
It just happened.
Okay. I think I was trying to turn off my camera just to save some bandwidth and I hit the wrong button, so apologies for that. So going back to the objective and looking at some of the plan elements that were evaluated during the study, which included land uses for private redevelopment, building height and form. In terms of transportation, looking at new street locations and street dimensions and designs, a new fire station to replace fire station number 4, and guidance for public spaces. And the process primarily was informed by the LRPC with participation from other commissions, including a representative from the Transportation Commission and other civic associations and property owners. It's a pretty good group of stakeholders that participated throughout the process. Looking at the community engagement schedule, again, we kicked off this project back in the fall of 2020, and we concluded the LRPC process in December of 21. We had a total of 6 LRPC meetings, 1 zoning committee meeting, and multiple opportunities for online engagements and updates throughout the process. Earlier this month on March 9th, we had a request to advertise with the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to approve the RTA with 2 amended motions, which I'll speak to later. The following night, we presented to the Housing Commission. The Housing Commission voted 7-1 and supported the update as well. On March 19th, staff presented at the county board the request to advertise. The county board voted unanimously to approve the RTA and amended the advertisement to broaden the scope to include a scenario with a fire station that's co-located with housing on the county's 10th Street site. And I'll talk about that in a minute. We're here tonight, Transportation Commission. We'll be going to the Planning Commission on next Wednesday, April 6th, for final adoption of the plan. We'll then be meeting with the Park and Rec Commission on the 19th before going to the County Board on the 23rd of April for final adoption of the plan. Just quickly looking at the study area, the process was primarily focused on the area shown here, which is bounded by Washington Boulevard, North Hudson Street, 10th Street North, and Kirkwood Road. Existing uses within the area include site number 1, which is a St. Charles Catholic Church, site number 2, which is the block along Wilson Boulevard with the Dominion substation, DPR, Triangle Park, and adjacent auto dealer. Site number 3 includes the Silver Diner assemblage, which is now referred to as the Bingham Center project. Site number 4 includes the Joyce Motors site, and site number 5 includes the Wells Fargo and the Verizon properties. And then finally, site number 6, which is the county-owned parcel on 10th Street, which currently includes Fire Station 4 and fire prevention offices in the former Clarendon House. This table here just provides a quick overview of the private development proposals that are within the study area. So site number 1, the St. Charles Church, would be proposing a new church and parish center along with a multifamily residential. The status of that site plan is pending. The Bingham Center or Silver Diner site is proposing a hotel on the north portion of the block on Clarendon Circle and a residential component on the south block. That project has been accepted but is on hold pending completion of this process, as well as the Joyce Motors project, which is proposing a residential project, also has been accepted and has been placed on hold till the completion of this process. We're anticipating a submission soon from the Wells Fargo and Verizon properties, which will include a replacement bank branch for the Wells Fargo, including commercial and office above and residential. As currently envisioned, all of these development proposals include elements that do not meet detailed policy guidance in the Clarendon Sector Plan, and in some cases, some of the proposed developments would require amendments to the zoning ordinance, provisions for the Clarendon Revitalization District to enable approval by the county. Before we go into some of the updates that are currently being proposed, just want to provide a quick overview of the 2006 sector plan guidance for the study area. So in addition to the private development sites that were just discussed on the previous 2 slides, there was a large rectilinear park that was envisioned along 10th Street where the current county property is, that would require the redevelopment of the Verizon site in phases. In terms of connectivity and transportation, there's 2 new segments of 10th Road, the east-west connections between North Hudson Street and Wilson Boulevard, providing connectivity east and west. You can see here there's the Clarendon Circle improvements were noted. Those were completed back in 2018 and 2019. And then there's intersection improvements that are planned and approved and actually under construction for the intersection of Washington Boulevard and 13th Street. And then for Fairfax Drive, you can see here the sector plan really envisioned Fairfax Drive as a flexible, mostly hardscape, multi-purpose space that could be occasionally shut down for markets and events. What staff will be presenting to you tonight is a pretty big improvement from that concept into more of a permanent public green space. So before jumping into the updates, and looking at the sector plan, there's a lot of overlap with text and images and maps and exhibits. So staff is really looking at this update as a comprehensive update to the 2006 plan. So it's going to include updates to not only text, exhibits, maps, images that are within chapters 1 through 4 of the plan. The final formatting will be done post county board adoption. So what's been shared to date with the public is really almost like a track changes version of the sector plan, showing a strike through and underline of where staff is recommending changes to the text, including some of the maps. In terms of the transportation section, staff has updated the language throughout to reflect current guidance and best practices, including revised policy guidance language to be inclusive of multimodal priorities and recent mobility trends, continue focus on adding and upgrading pedestrian and bicycle facilities, including filling gaps in the network, change parking language to reflect the latest off-street guidance, remove language that centers the driving experience over other modes, incorporated guidance from the MTP elements adopted since 2006, and updating street classifications to align with those in the MTP. So really organize the main areas of change within the sector plan are really focused on these 5 elements, including the public realm, the block structure, I mentioned the street locations, public space and fire station number 4. There are changes and recommendations for building height and form, use mix, affordable housing, and building preservation. But for this evening, I'm trying to focus this presentation on the public realm, but I'm happy to address any of the other topics as needed. So looking at the public realm, so you can see here a comparison showing the 2006 sector plan, illustrative plan, side by side with staff's current recommendations. There are some minor adjustments to some street locations in the block structure, which includes a slight shift of the new 10th road between North Irving and Wilson Boulevard, which is largely informed by some of the deals and property ownership boundaries with the Bingham Center and the Joyce Motors projects. This was something that was not envisioned in 2006. I mentioned Fairfax Drive. The 2006, as I mentioned earlier, envisioned a plan that was more flexible and hardscape. The new proposed concept is for more of a permanent linear park with a shared street, enhanced bicycle facilities, and more landscape and biophilic design elements than was envisioned in 2006. Staff also is recommending a new mid-block connection through the St. Charles block to create a more walkable block scale and to create more pedestrian connections between public spaces, which is a goal of the sector plan and the public spaces master plan. And we are also recommending sites that are identified for retention and future expansion of public open space on the Triangle Park and the adjacent parcels between Triangle Park and the Dominion substation. And we're also recommending alternatives for the county site on 10th Street. Related to the county site on 10th Street and Fire Station 4, we've been working very closely with the fire department throughout the process. And we wanted to just point out some important considerations that we're looking at when making recommendations. We're recommending that the sector plan be flexible to account for both on and off-site options that may arise in the future for the fire station. We understand that Fire Station 4 is the central station in the RB corridor, and it must remain in Clarendon, and it must have arterial street frontage and be located no farther than 4 to 6 blocks from the current site. And that an on-site fire station is really the only option that's within the county's control, and that any off-site acquisition options and cost are unpredictable in the current market. So therefore, staff, to allow flexibility for future use of the site, staff is recommending amending the plan to allow for 3 alternative development scenarios with a potential fourth scenario that was directed to staff from the county board on March 19th. As I mentioned earlier, would be a scenario with a fire station co-located with housing. The first scenario that you see, 2.17, would be a standalone fire station, assumed underground parking, approximately a 10,000 square foot park, potential for rooftop public space. The scenario in the middle, 2.18, would be assuming the fire station is relocated, could achieve an affordable housing project with about a 17,000 square foot park, yielding approximately 218 committed affordable units on site. And then figure 2.19, it would also assume relocation of the fire station and conversion of the L-shaped county parcel to approximately 1 acre size park. I mentioned Fairfax Drive. This is a pretty big change compared to 2006. Here we're looking at a illustrative plan as recommended by staff for the West End, including Fairfax Drive. So I mentioned the Midblock connection through St. Charles Church that would provide a connection to the future Fairfax Drive linear park and the 13th Street Park on the corner of 13th and Washington Boulevard. This would be a vehicular and pedestrian entrance only from Washington Boulevard, where service and loading could occur interior to the block here, whereas access to the park would be only pedestrian and bicycle. So no vehicular access would be encouraged here to the park. So this would serve only off of Washington Boulevard as vehicular access for loading and garage access for the church. And staff has also recommended design guidelines that are included as part of the urban design guidelines for this connection, including guidance on overhead bridging and also the ground plane experience and some dimensional recommendations for the mid-block connection to make sure that it's a safe and welcoming pedestrian experience, and trying to avoid a dark tunnel-like experience to try and get as much air and light into the space as possible, and again, to make it feel as public and accessible as possible. Fairfax Drive currently is envisioned to be a one-way shared street with enhanced bicycle facility that's indicated in concept in the orange dashed line. And of course, the remainder of the space would be converted to more of a green linear public space that's permanent, which is a pretty big departure from the 2006 plan. Throughout the process, we have heard some concerns about the the loss of the amount of parking on Fairfax Drive and access for service and loading to some of the businesses that are along Fairfax Drive, such as Northside Social and the T&J Auto Body. Staff has identified there's approximately 100 feet of right-of-way on Fairfax Drive that could accommodate a pretty significant linear park space that's approximately 50 to 60 feet wide, which is actually, in comparison, a little bit wider than the public space over at Market Common that most people probably are familiar with. There's enough right-of-way to accommodate an enhanced bicycle facility, a travel lane, and some short-term parking and loading along the edge of that shared street, as indicated in some of the precedent images here from Seattle, where there could be some parking that is kind of notched between planters or trees to provide space for parking, or vendors during events. If there's some type of activity in the park where there's maybe food trucks or something, there's significant space there to provide some short-term access. And of course, staff is also recommending a special treatment with special paving on Fairfax Drive to help define different spaces and zones. Looking at some of the maps, there are several maps within the sector plan and the zoning ordinance. I think almost a dozen maps. I'm not going to go through them all here tonight. I'm focusing these on the transportation related map changes. So here you can see the streetscapes map comparison. Staff has made some recommendations and changes to reflect recommendations for Fairfax Drive. Staff has also identified a segment of Wilson Boulevard on the south edge where could be some flexibility to achieve the desired street cross section there on Wilson Boulevard, along with a note in the legend. And I mentioned the slight shifting of the 10th Road to the north between Irving and Wilson Boulevard. I'm sorry, that was the streetscapes map. This is actually the streets map. So the previous map was indicating the different sidewalk widths recommended in the plan. The streets map, I think, as mentioned, includes the shifting of 10th Road to the north by approximately 20 feet, the addition of a north-south alley between the Joyce Motors and the Bingham Center block, and then staff is, as indicated with the asterisks on the St. Charles block, indicating pedestrian-only access to the future Fairfax Drive public space. And then lastly, staff is recommending to remove the service alley, ped, and bike connection between the Northside Social and the Kirby Garage or the T&J Auto Body, as it's privately owned and there's not a mid-block crossing there, nor would staff want to encourage crossing there without any kind of signalization. In terms of some of the cross sections, there are, again, probably about a dozen cross sections in the sector plan. The only two cross sections that are being updated are for Kirkwood Road between Fairfax Drive and Washington Boulevard. And the next cross section would be for Wilson Boulevard. So for Kirkwood Road, staff is recommending maintaining the existing curb-to-curb dimension, and then introducing two travel lanes with a center turn lane and bike lanes on both sides with a protective buffer. So this is a little bit different than the 2006 plan, and this would push the build to line to achieve the 14-foot streetscape to the east into the St. Charles Church block, maintaining that existing curb-to-curb dimension. Jumping over to Wilson Boulevard by the Northside Social, staff is recommending, and I'm sure everybody on the call would agree that the sidewalk experience on the Northside Social side of Wilson Boulevard is very unhospitable to pedestrians. It's sometimes as narrow as 4 to 5 feet with utility poles, somewhat impassable. Staff is recommending to achieve a streetscape with street trees on that side of the street at a dimension of 12 feet with two travel lanes on the west side. I'm sorry, I'm getting confused here. 4 travel lanes, and then to accommodate the streetscape on the Bingham Center or the Silver Diner side, staff is recommending alternating street parking with street trees as to not push in further into the property boundary on the Silver Diner property. So this would require a restriping and a movement of the center line of Wilson Boulevard to accommodate this cross section. Other maps related to transportation include the bikeways map. So you can see the two side-by-sides here. Staff is recommending to include the enhanced bicycle facilities on 10th Street North, which is consistent with the MTP bike element, including revisions to the legend text as shown here with the proposed enhanced bicycle facility in the orange dash line. There's some slight modifications to some of the transit bus stop locations or bus route as shown here at the bottom of the slide as well. And looking at the MTP, since the Clarendon Sector Plan was adopted in 2006, The county has adopted a new MTP, and while some minor differences exist between the two documents, like differences in street classification system and a new street typology, the MTP embraces and reinforces the key transportation policies that are found in 2006 sector plan. The study area that's shown here as hatched on the map in blue indicates an area for future planned streets. So therefore, there are no amendments needed as part of the sector plan update for the MTP. I'll just quickly glaze over the GLUP amendments before we can jump into discussion. So to achieve consistency between the GLUP and the 2022 plan, there are several amendments that are being proposed to the GLUP map, including adjustments to some of the street locations, alignments to correspond to the planned or built conditions, additions of triangle open space symbols for future public open spaces, some changes of land use from semi-public to public areas over near the West End Plaza that are now county owned that were purchased for part of the Clare and the Circle intersection improvements. And then removing the vehicular connection I mentioned between Northside Social and the T&J Auto Body. And then finally narrowing the Fairfax Drive to reflect the conversion of a travelway to a linear park. And also staff is recommending amendments to Articles 3, 9, and 18, including maps in the zoning ordinance to reflect proposed staff recommendations. These are mainly focused to Section 9, the Clarendon Revitalization District, some modifications to allow for hotel use in the use mix regulations, some modifications to building step backs, removal of some content related to very specific guidance on street tree species, and then there's some other technical changes to reflect recommendations. Staff is also recommending exception to permit additional height above the rooftop space for hotel uses, and also including a new definition for rooftop amenity space. So moving on to commission review and staff recommendations, I mentioned the Planning Commission voted on March the 9th, 11-0 to support the advertisement of the sector plan update and the associated GLUP and zoning amendments. With the following amendments, the Planning Commission recommended that staff incorporate a recommendation in the plan update for full frontage preservation in situ for the Joyce Motors building, which is a building that's ranked as essential in the historic resources inventory. The Planning Commission also recommended that the plan update indicate a clear preference for use of the county site on 10th Street or public land as government facilities, community facilities, or other services provided by the county, such as parks, fire stations, community gardens, tennis, basketball courts. Preference for some of the other scenarios for the county site with public space were favored over the housing scenario shown in figure 2.18. The Housing Commission I mentioned also voted 7-1 in support of the plan update, contingent upon the plan supporting affordable housing at the county-owned 10th Street site. So staff is recommending that the Plan Commission and the County Board adopt the following elements associated with the Clarendon Sector Plan update planning process, including adoption of the 2022 Clarendon Sector Plan, which is an update to the 2006 Clarendon Sector Plan, the GLUP map and booklet amendments, as well as the zoning ordinance amendments to Articles 3, 9, and 18, including maps 9.2.5 through 9.2.12. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Ms. Obakoya, do we have any speakers on this item?
There are no speakers.
All right, well, that makes it easy. I was the LRPC rep for this process. So just a few bits of context for the commission. A good portion of the conversation was around that 10th Street site, about options for it, the whole conversation about can the fire station move? If it does move, what's the best use for the site? The neighborhood was really excited about the original plan for the park, but that was predicated on the fire station going away and on the Verizon portion of that Verizon site becoming available, which it has not. From a transportation perspective, I would encourage everybody to kind of, focus a bit on some of the revisions to the streets map. There's some definite changes there. I think we spent a fair amount of time talking about the design of the linear park on Fairfax Drive, and I think we got to a really good place. There were a number of iterations there. So definitely take a look at that. And with that said, if commissioners have questions or comments, go ahead and start throwing your hands up in Teams. And I will ask a couple quick questions in the meantime. Staff is recommending the removal of a bike and pedestrian connection that existed that exists in the planning document that we currently have for Clarendon. And that's kind of the idea of a connection between Northside Social and the Kirby Garage. Can staff talk a bit more about the reasoning behind that removal? Mr. Wallace said a bit about there not being kind of a Midblock connection there now, and that the county wouldn't support one in the future. I would just love some more detail on that.
Yeah, I can shed a little bit more light on that. And I have some backup slides with some images that may be helpful. But as I mentioned, the site is currently privately owned and currently used for the parking and storage of vehicles. In fact, the site is frequently packed with cars, preventing access through the site. As I also mentioned, staff would not be recommending any type of mid-block connection at this location, given the proximity to Clarendon Circle intersection. So for those reasons, and for the difficulty of being able to achieve some type of public access easement in the future, being that both of those sites are both historic structures, so those are full building preservation, so they're not going anywhere. They're not expected to redevelop anytime in the future. So therefore, staff didn't feel like it was going to be, it would be very difficult to achieve a public access easement and a public connection, a dedicated connection through the site on that location. Is that helpful? I do have some images showing some of the existing conditions, if those are helpful to bring up as well.
It is. I think it would be useful to see those. I did a quick measurement on Google Maps, and that block from crosswalk to crosswalk, Clarendon Circle down to 10th Street or whatever, is 570 feet, which is, in my opinion, at least, an extremely long block. Usually I feel like in Arlington, we're aiming for about like a 250-foot block, which if you put a mid-block smack in the middle of it is what we would have. So I'm intrigued by the notion that staff would not support a mid-block crossing in that location.
Yeah, and I'll just run through some existing images, and then if I might defer to some other staff on the call from DES if they may want to weigh in. But yeah, here's an existing photograph looking from Wilson Boulevard through the site. Just another angle, actually, the picture taken from on top of the T&J auto body looking down. You can see, I mean, they really pack in the cars there. It's not very passable in terms of pedestrian connectivity, but I know that I can't speak for the Northside Social and the garage, but I know that they, as seen in this image, rely pretty heavily on this parking lot for their service and potential loading which I know is a problem, losing some of the parking and loading opportunities along Fairfax Drive. So, for those reasons, we just thought it would be very difficult to achieve a public feeling connection through this space as envisioned in 2006. And if I could back up to the streets map, it's indicated as you can see on the left, it's indicated as a dashed line, which was indicated as a alley connection. I think somewhere in one of the illustrative maps, it may have indicated pedestrian and bicycle access, but it was mainly, I think, if I'm going, I'd have to go back and look at the narrative, but I believe that it speaks more to the service nature of this connection versus a stronger, ped bike connection. I mean, it was not shown on the bikeways map, for example. But certainly, if there's anybody else on the call from transportation that would want to speak to this, I'd welcome their support. If I could phone a friend.
Yeah, I can help with that, Brett. This is Allison Bullock. I'm the transportation planning manager, and I'll just support what Brett said. I think a big consideration was because of the substantial changes that we'd be making to Fairfax Drive and the removal of some of the parking there, that these businesses might feel further pressure on those sites and those parking spaces. So we were trying to be sensitive to that and balance that out with the new 10th Road connection and what's recommended for Fairfax Drive.
All right, I'll definitely have more to say on that in the future, but I would like to jump to some other commissioners. So Commissioner Brose, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Chairman Sweat. And I've read parts of the report, thank you, and the presentation, but I'm just a little more maybe revisiting of the presentation. It's specifically around Fairfax Drive. I get it that it sounds like St. Charles was interested in also this sort of redesign. But I'm still curious about the reduction in parking and how that would affect. I think you just answered in terms of where some of that parking would go, but we're now in this. Just a little more context of it becomes a pedestrian way with some other uses, but the church is losing its parking spaces, it sounds like, and some of the other parking spaces that people have used for the retail around that area. Can you just give a little more background or consideration on what that was?
Yeah, sure, I can address that. And as I mentioned, this was brought up numerous times throughout the process, and we realized the importance of the parking and loading on Fairfax that's out there today is very convenient. And certainly the loss of that to green space was brought up as a concern. As I mentioned earlier, I mentioned there's a pretty significant amount of right-of-way out there today, which, and I'll just run through a couple of images. I mean, you can see in this image here the amount of right-of-way that's out there today with the angled parking spaces, the median. There's the metro, the orange and silver line runs down Fairfax Drive as well. So you can imagine there's pretty good amount of space here to be able to accommodate, I think, a pretty good sizable linear park space, a shared street parking and loading and enhanced bicycle facility. And so I have a somewhat of a diagram that could, just one possibility. Just looking at that aerial, you can see with the orange arrows are some of the areas where there are existing loading access that are required for some of the businesses, including Dominion Substation, the T&J Auto, the Northside Social. These are curb cuts with like roll-up garage doors where they have routine deliveries. The blue space, which is where the current bike lane is today, could potentially be converted to potential curbside, short-term pickup, short-term parking and loading access for those businesses. You can imagine a potential one-way shared street that pretty much follows the path of Fairfax Drive today as it approaches the Clarendon Circle and loops up north. And then a potential location for an enhanced bicycle facility that's shown in green. That would be located approximately where at the back of some of those angled parking spaces are today. So, and you can imagine the rest of the space being converted to a park space. So there is significant amount of right of way to work with here. And again, through this process, we talked about this numerous times, but at the end of the day, and our recommendations were recommending that the final design of this space, including all modes of circulation and park space and amenities, be determined at a future park master planning process. I mentioned the metro infrastructure here. There are two large ventilation structures that are in the planted median along Fairfax Drive, and then there's as seen in this image here, this is on the St. Charles Church property looking to the west towards the red top cab. There's a very large metro ventilation structure and an egress stair. So it's very important that the fire department have access to this egress stair, which is located up here on the top of the screen in case there's an emergency in the metro tunnel. So there's a lot of competing interest here, obviously, and needs for circulation and access, parking, loading, service, park space, infrastructure. And so there's going to be a lot of future coordination needed in any kind of design process. So, but we feel like there's enough space here to achieve a lot of the goals that have been identified.
Great. No, thank you very much. That helps. Thanks.
Sure.
Commissioner Noland, go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you. So my question here is related to, if you could just illuminate maybe a bit more on the biking facility. I don't think there was any details, and I know it's, just a possibility at this point, but was there any sort of envisioning there? Is this a, docking station for private bicycles? Is this a shared biking facility to rent bikes potentially? Are there other micromobility options? Again, any details you could share there?
Yeah, currently as in the plan update, I mentioned that we are updating a lot of the text to reflect best practices with micromobility and best practices since 2006. But in terms of the bike facility, staff is currently envisioning a two-way bike facility with some form of protection along this corridor, as identified on the bikeway map shown here in the orange dashed line. So that's on Fairfax Drive, providing a good connection between Virginia Square and Clarendon, but also, as you can see here, on 10th Road North or 10th Street North as well. I don't think that the sector plan, well, I know the sector plan is not getting into detail on locations of docking stations. There may be language, I may ask Ms. Bullock to weigh in. I believe there may be language in the parking section of the sector plan that may speak to parking of, micro mobility devices and things like that, if I'm not mistaken, but not shown on any of the proposed sector plan maps.
Yeah, for the overall Clarendon area, we did include some language. We updated a lot of the on-street parking language to be a bit more broad and acknowledge the number of curbside uses that we have today. So a lot of that language now refers to on-street vehicular and micromobility parking. So it leaves open the possibility of bike corrals and bike share stations and all of that. For this particular site, we didn't get into the specifics of citing a capital bike share station or a micromobility hub or anything like that. As Brett mentioned, the enhanced bike facility refers to a two-way bike lane that would have some form of protection along it, which would be decided during the planning and design.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. That helps answer it.
Awesome. Commissioner Muradovic, why don't you go ahead?
All right. Thank you. So it's good to see some of the blocks being broken up, which is a best practice specified in the MTP. I'm specifically referring to the St. Charles and the Joyce Motors and Bingham Center blocks. But I would kind of like to align myself with some of the concerns that Chairman Slatt has raised, or at least why there wouldn't be a crosswalk or something in that street when you're crossing over from 10th, I believe it's 10th Street, the Joyce Motors Bingham Center site. So I know there might be limitations on what can be done on a private lot, but having 570 feet or so of road with no crosswalk in a place that's as urbanized and being increasingly urbanized, such as Clarendon, doesn't really make sense to me. I mean, it's not a highway. It seems that cars are being prioritized on that section rather than pedestrians. I don't want my criticism to detract from many of the other really positive things with this plan, but I just wanted that to be noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Moradovic. Yeah, so I think at this point I just want to put a few comments out there specifically about this spot. The first is I consider 570 feet a super block, and whether the pedestrian connection stays in the plan there or not, I think we need to be recognizing the need for a potential crossing at this spot in Wilson Boulevard. I don't think there is a downside to including that connection in the plan. Staff is 100% correct. Under the existing uses of those two buildings and the existing ownership of those two buildings, the likelihood of this connection happening is very low, but uses change and ownership changes. And I think there is a decent chance that if we truly want to preserve these buildings, there will reach a point in the future where the county may have to get involved and end up owning one of them. In which point, like, it would be great to have this sort of planning guidance on the books to say, oh, if we get this opportunity, we should have this connection here. My third point is people walk through that connection now. It's private property, and in theory, maybe they're trespassing or something like that. But there's not a wall or anything, and people walk through there now. And I think when these projects that are envisioned across Wilson Boulevard get built, and all of a sudden all of these people live on the other side of Wilson Boulevard, and 10th Road gets built and dumps out right here on Wilson Boulevard, we will be creating additional desire to cross at this point, especially when just on the other side, we build this beautiful new linear park. So I think we are setting ourselves up for conflict and setting ourselves up for failure if we are not planning for the eventuality that a whole bunch of people living in these new buildings across Wilson are not going to want to walk all the way down to Clarendon Circle or all the way down to 10th Street in order to get across to sit in the park or stroll in the park or go to Northside Social and grab a coffee or anything like that. We include transportation connections that are on private property all the time. Basically, all of the ones that are in the sector plan here are on private property. Now, they're on private property that we expect to redevelop. And so we know that that is the likely method to achieve them. Achieving a connection on something that's not going to redevelop, but stay a by right use is harder and less likely to occur. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't leave this desire in the planning document, in my opinion. I don't know if staff has any reaction to that or would like to comment on that, or just would like to take that as my comments on the matter. All right, hearing none, I want to jump to Commissioner Raddick.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo those the same sentiments, but without going into the detail, there's some of those same arguments as far as desire for people to cross and apply to. I'm not sure what the street is off the top of my head, but at the top of the St. Charles site, is it 12th? No, 15th Street. I think it's 12th Street, where there's not currently planned to be a crosswalk, but I think there should be a crosswalk there. And from what I've heard in the past, it's too close to the Clarendon Circle intersection, and that's why I think staff does not want to have a crosswalk there. But the fact is, people cross there. I see it pretty much every time I go through that intersection, and I think there should be a crosswalk there. So I'm not sure if staff has any new information on that, or if I'm just beating the same old dead horse.
Yeah, I don't have anything new to add there other than what you noted already. But thank you.
Great. Commissioner Lantelmi.
Yeah, I just want to go on record as supporting.
Jim,
Commissioner
we can't
Lantelmi,
hear
you cut out.
Yeah,
You cut out for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, my Teams keeps going in and out for some reason, so I might be cut off whenever I'm talking. Anyway, my point is I support leaving it in.
Thank you. Commissioner Terry?
Hey, good evening. I just wanted to echo sentiments about making sure that pedestrians can operate safely, especially when we're going to be building something that people want to cross the street to get to, and thinking about just looking where some of the bus stops are. Also just want to reinforce the need for thinking about micromobility. Obviously with the train, this metro station here, we're thinking about last mile travel from the train station. And so scooters, bikes, and other micromobility options need to be there and need to have safe places for those to be, so they're also not blocking the sidewalk for pedestrians who need to get through, who may have mobility problems and need assistance and can't navigate around those when they're blocking the middle of the sidewalks. Then also, I think something that probably was not contemplated in 2006 and maybe isn't being thought of today, Clarendon, the restaurants some of them have transitioned to allowing dining on the sidewalk, and just wondering how enabling that, which I think has made it a more vibrant area, a more welcoming area as well, and just wondering how that has figured into what's been proposed here as well.
Well, I think I can speak to that. With the parking, I think with the future private redevelopment, we would, as staff, would be looking to achieve some potential public parking as part of those projects to make up for some of the loss of parking, for example, on Fairfax Drive, but also looking at other opportunities for curbside parking spaces in the study area, and then also utilizing other public parking garages within the area to support those businesses.
Was that in response to what I said? Because I didn't mention parking.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question then? I'm sorry.
Thinking about outdoor dining, using the sidewalk space to be able to enable restaurants to serve customers on outside, and just wondering how that has figured into this plan to be able to enable people to do that safely through whatever the development is in the Clarendon area.
Okay, yeah, no, I understand the comment. Now, with regard to some of the temporary outdoor seating areas on sidewalks, I don't believe that we have any language in the plan update with reference to some of those establishments, but that's something we can consider looking at to help support, the dining, outdoor dining in Clarendon, but I don't believe we have any language in there currently speaking to those temporary outdoor seating areas.
Yeah, just to echo what I said, I think it's really made it a more vibrant and welcoming area for options, especially now we're still in the pandemic. People don't want to eat inside necessarily, and giving those options provides a way for people to come out and enjoy themselves in Arlington.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Price, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of course, my camera's not working. Fantastic. Hopefully you can hear me. So I'm sorry if I came in late to this discussion. I just wanted to ask, and as you may have covered this in your presentation, but in addition to the open space that you have planned along Fairfax Drive, and I thought I saw more open space planned right near, of course, the Metro. Can you speak about more? And I read a number of the letters that came in from the community. There's a lot of concern about open space and about park space. Can you speak to that regarding the revisions to the sector plan, and what's being done and what's being planned for?
Sure. So hopefully you should see my screen now where we're comparing the illustrative plan with the 2022 illustrative plan. So of course you can see the conversion of Fairfax Drive from more of a hardscape to more of a linear public space, with some other modifications. If you look at the St. Charles Church block near Clarendon Circle, there's a building mass at the sharp kind of triangular point there. That building mass is being pulled back because that used to be a former Petco building that was demolished and purchased for the Clarendon Circle intersection improvements. So that there's somewhat of an increase of open space there at the West End Plaza, there on Clarendon Circle. I mentioned the retention and potential expansion of the Triangle Park on the corner of 10th Street and Fairfax. There's currently a Department of Parks and Recreation maintenance facility and a small triangular green space there. So staff is recommending removing the future development potential for that site, which was identified in the 2006 plan. As you can see on the left, there's a residential building up to 90 feet in height. So we're recommending retention of the Triangle Park and also potential expansion and acquisition of the adjacent property next to the Dominion substation to further expand open space opportunities along Fairfax Drive. I've mentioned the scenarios for the county-owned property. You noted the concerns that we've been hearing from the community about the loss of the planned 50,000 square foot large rectilinear public space that you see here on the left. Again, that was noted that that would have to be achieved in phases with the redevelopment of the Verizon building, which currently houses some critical infrastructure, telecommunications facility for the RV corridor. And as we understand it, that facility is not going anywhere anytime soon. In fact, the Wells Fargo and Verizon project is transferring the density from that site to build a mixed-use project on the Wells Fargo project. So further rendering this Verizon property as almost de facto preservation in place for some time in the future. So therefore, we're recommending these scenarios for the county site, again, assuming replacement of a fire station on site with some open space opportunities on the ground level, but also for potential rooftop public spaces, which is something that we've heard as a desire from the community. We're also including the other two options, with affordable housing or completely conversion of the site from of the L-shaped site to a 1 acre park. Totally looking at all of the spaces, if I can just pull up the public spaces maps here, which I didn't show before, but overall there's a net increase of public space within the study area as then was envisioned in 2006, depending on which scenario is pursued for the county's property. So while staff is not seeing, Fairfax Drive as a substitution for the large park on 10th Street, we're seeing as a complementary open space as part of a larger public space network. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, please let me know.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. I was a little late I missed that part of the presentation. So thank you.
Sure.
All right, I'm not seeing any other hands. So if anybody else has any other questions or comments, or if anybody would like to make a motion, just go ahead and throw the hand up. Mr. Walls, could you go ahead and throw the kind of I feel like you had like kind of a recommended motion on a slide, because our staff report is the RTA language. It's not the adoption language.
Yeah. Shall I move to adopt?
That would be if desired. That would be great.
I will move to adopt the following elements associated with the Clarendon Sector Plan update planning process, including the adoption of the 2022 Clarendon Sector Plan, the General Land Use Plan GLUP map and booklet amendments, and the Arlington County Zoning Ordinance amendments to Articles 3, 9, and 18, including maps 9.2.5 through 0.2.12.
All right, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion of the motion or amendments to the motion? I have an amendment to move. Oh, if I just minimize Teams. Okay, that's better. I would move an amendment that the Transportation Commission furthermore recommends that staff include on map 2.10 a desired bike and pedestrian connection between Wilson Boulevard and Fairfax Drive, between Northside Social and the Kirby Garage, similar to the connection currently included in the Clarendon Sector Plan, but with a bike and pedestrian character rather than an alley character. And furthermore, recommend that staff note the need for a mid-block crossing across Wilson Boulevard at the intersection with the new 10th Road North.
I'll second that.
Second.
That's seconded by Commissioner Lantelmi. So I will just kind of describe that as essentially kind of asking staff to go ahead and put that connection back in, but as a bike and pedestrian connection rather than what seemed like more of an alley and loading connection in the existing plan, and noting the need for mid-block crossings to handle that pedestrian demand that I was talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. Is there any discussion of my motion to amend?
Makes sense.
All right, then let's vote. This is just a vote on the motion to amend. We will then have a vote on the motion as amended or it'll fail, and we'll move on from there. So Commissioner Brose.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Nolan?
Aye.
You broke up there, Chairman.
Commissioner Lantelmi?
Aye.
Commissioner Locker?
Aye.
Commissioner Ludlow?
Aye.
Did Commissioner Muradovic make it tonight? Yes.
I'm here. I
Commissioner
even spoke earlier.
You did. I'm
Yes.
sorry. You were just a little bit late, and I took attendance way too early in the meeting.
My vote is aye. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Price?
Aye.
Raddick?
Aye.
Commissioner Yeri,
Aye.
Commissioner Terry,
Aye.
and I will also vote yes. So that is unanimous. The motion has been amended. Is there any discussion on the motion as amended? So essentially the county manager's recommendation with the additional amendment that we just added. All right, seeing no hands, Commissioner Bros,
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan,
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi,
Aye.
Commissioner Locker,
Aye.
Commissioner Ludlow,
Aye.
Commissioner Maradovic,
Aye.
Commissioner Price,
Aye.
Commissioner Raddick,
Aye.
Commissioner Yeri,
Aye.
Commissioner Terry.
Aye.
I also vote yes, and so that motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much for staff for an excellent presentation, and look forward to this moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we can move on to the next agenda item, which is the feasibility study for transit signal priority on major corridors in the county. And presenting this item is Pierre Holloman. Welcome.
Actually, it's William Jones.
Oh, okay. Please take it away. William Jones. Thank you.
Good evening, Ms. Bridget. Good evening,
Good evening, William.
Commissioner Chair, Commissioner members. Here to present study and project update on transit signal priority. The team has been working to move this effort forward since discussion on this took place during last summer. So I will go on ahead and get started. Hopefully you can hear me well and also see the slide.
Yes.
Okay. So in terms of the county's goals for transit signal priority, and I also want to give some regional context, some of the goals that we're looking at are to maintain reliable transit service and increase on-time performance, achieve overall corridor transit travel time savings, and also seek to reduce delay and emissions at intersections. One thing to note from a regional context on busy corridors in Northern Virginia, Metro buses spend approximately 18% of time stopped at traffic lights, which is one factor to slow down bus service. But another factor that plays a part into this is that as new and infill development comes in, it brings in construction and increased density, which also in some instances means additional travel time delays for buses as the construction is taking place, just because the way the street network is set up in the county, in order to have access to bring in concrete, bring in materials to construct these development projects, they typically will take up travel lanes at various times of the day, depending on how the permits are set up for allowing that activity to take place. All right, give me a second here. So just to take a step back and kind of do some education, transit signal priority really is an operational strategy that facilitates the movement of transit vehicles through signal control intersections by adjusting the share traffic signal green time, the green light time, if you will, at those intersections to provide priority to transit vehicles. If planned and designed properly, TSP may have little impact to the general traffic and could be installed and maintained in a cost-efficient manner. And really, the goal of it is just to coordinate buses and traffic signals to reduce the time buses are stopped at traffic lights along the corridor to try to improve travel times. Okay, oops, sorry about that. In that overview, what I would like to note here is that I shared with you kind of what it is. I'm going to attempt to share what is not. Transit signal priority is not designed as a standalone solution to increase frequency of service or to reduce the number of buses operating on corridors. However, I would say that TSP is one tool that can work well with other measures to improve bus speed, such as all-door boarding and dedicated bus lanes. And while these tools are in the toolkit and they can be applied individually, in many cases, projects most benefit when they are applied together. And just to give a little bit of context here, what you're looking at on the screen is kind of some of the transit signal priority treatment types. And so what you're looking at, the first one is basically, it's called green extension, but it simply acts as a way to increase the time that the light is green along the corridor. So as a bus reaches the intersection, it's given some extended time if transit signal priority is called for that bus coming and approaching the intersection, gives it time to allow the bus to pass the intersection, and in this case, reach the bus stop on the other side of the street, or just to continue on to clear the intersection. The second one, green reallocation, really speaks to shifting the time. So if the light's green and the bus is approaching the intersection, it would kind of shift the traffic signal time to allow when the light turns green for the bus to come through the intersection. And then the third one is really looking at shrinking the red light. So if you're on a street and the bus is operating on that street and it's coming to the intersection and the traffic signal is red, this would look at providing a signal to allow the light to turn green a little bit ahead of time to then allow the bus to traverse through the intersection. Looking at doing that, approaching with a vehicle sooner instead of the bus having to wait at the traffic signal. Now, those in the previous slide are some of the treatments that could be applied depending on various conditions. The primary two that we're looking at are these two here, early green and extended green. And in general, we're looking at these two in order to create a safe and efficient intersection with transit signal priority. These two help us to take into consideration a few things, or a couple of things at least. The amount of vehicular traffic on cross streets. So remember, as I mentioned, there's a condition where if the bus is coming ahead and the light is red, to give it an opportunity as it's coming, instead of it waiting for the cross traffic green light signal to go through its phase and change, you will start to turn that cross traffic from green to yellow to red, and then the traffic which has the bus coming to turn it to green, so that as the bus is approaching the red light, it actually gets a green light to keep moving as opposed to sitting still. The second one we're looking at with extended green is kind of what I shared in the first visual. This one up here, green extension, which keeps the green light green in order for the bus to go across the intersection. The two other things I want to mention in terms of factors is not only just the amount of vehicular traffic on cross streets, but the number of pedestrians crossing the intersection. So this looks at taking into account intersections where there's a pedestrian phase that's built into the traffic cycle between the intersections. And basically also with that, basically just to ensure that pedestrians have the opportunity to cross the main corridor in which transit signal priority is on as they're on the cross street. So these are the two that the two treatments that are being considered at the moment in this process. So I gave you some background on transit signal priority. So kind of getting into the study that took place. We began in the summer of 2021 with a consultant, and the consultant looked at and reviewed current traffic signal operations on several corridors. I'll speak to those corridors in just a moment. They also looked to determine how best to accommodate bus travel while maintaining traffic flows. Traffic flows with the corridor in which the team was evaluating and looking at, as well as the traffic from the cross streets, those intersections. They also sought to determine if bus stop locations needed adjustment to support transit signal priority. Key thing to note about that, transit signal priority and bus stop locations work best when the bus stop location is on the far side of the intersection. So basically, you cross the intersection and the bus stop is on the other side. And then they looked at to determine which intersections within each of the corridors would be eligible for transit signal priority, meaning not every intersection may have this deployed. So the corridors that were evaluated are listed here, approximately 5 corridors. Langston Boulevard between East Falls Church and North Lynn Street. Glebe Road between I-66 and Walter Reed Drive. Washington Boulevard between I-66 and Arlington Boulevard. Crystal City, Pentagon City corridor, but in particular, Crystal Drive between 33rd Street Station and 12th Street South. And the Columbia Pike corridor. Off to the right of the table, you see the number of signalized intersections within those segments. And to the left of that, the bus routes that are served on those corridors are included there. Quickly, in terms of the evaluation criteria that was used by the consultant team, they broke it into two main sections here. So you're looking at transit operations, the service demand in terms of frequency and passenger activity along the routes, its effectiveness, the variability in the schedule, and the runtime. And the runtime in this case is going from one end of the line to the other end of the line, or if you want to look at it in the case of the example, Langston Boulevard going from East Falls Church Station to Roslyn, and or Roslyn back to East Falls Church, looking at it one way or looking at it round trip. And as I mentioned earlier, bus stop locations. From the traffic operations standpoint, they looked at the VC ratio, volume to capacity ratio. They looked at slack time within the traffic signal network, and they looked at pedestrian phase timings. And I put in parentheses auto. What that basically means is there are certain intersections within the county where the pedestrian phase is automatically called when the traffic signal changes based upon the main street and the cross street traffic, as opposed to some locations, which there are not many in the county, I don't believe, where a pedestrian has to activate the button in order to get a walk signal. So these are the criteria that were evaluated and used to look at the feasibility of these corridors and to determine the feasibility of having transit signal priority at some or all of those intersections based upon those corridors. As a result of going through and evaluating those factors, they determined a couple of things. The first biggest thing that you will notice is of the 5 corridors evaluated, only 4 of them are moving forward. Langston Boulevard, Columbia Pike, North Sound Glebe Road, and Crystal Drive corridor. Washington Boulevard was not recommended for transit signal priority implementation at this time. And that's really because there were only a few candidate intersections, meaning there's not a lot of added value you will gain from attempting to put in transit signal priority along Washington Boulevard at the moment. That may change as we look at other efforts in the future. Evaluation findings and recommendations of the study have been undergone a reviewing process in coordination with other groups within DOT, particularly traffic engineering and operations. And so what we're looking at are some of the next steps that are on the right-hand side of this slide in terms of establishing a technical team, which has taken place between staff within the Transit Bureau, traffic engineering and operations, Metrobus planning, and Metrobus transportation staff. And the second piece that I think is a big one is just to come together with a game plan for design and implementation of this effort. The study looked at basically giving recommendations on how to move forward. So we have that information to develop a game plan on how to take it from where we are now to the next steps that actually bring about some action. You're currently looking at the map, and this map is a part of what would be used to kind of lay out and share with those as we move forward. So I want to call your attention pretty much to the legend here, and we can come back in the event we need to show these a little bit bigger. Wherever you see the corridors here, where you see green dots, those are intersections where the team felt that those intersections would be favorable candidates to install transit signal priority. If you see a gold or orange, those are intersections that would be candidates for this as well if the bus stop is relocated, typically from the near side intersection to the far side intersection. And then there are some locations in red, locations that indicate transit signal priority is not recommended. In the instances where it's not recommended, it's typically because from a traffic operations and vehicle moving standpoint, it's noted that doing signal priority may do more harm than good. As I mentioned, you have 4 of these corridors that have been recommended to move forward, with the Washington Boulevard corridor, as you see, has the most intersections that are being looked at as red, is the corridor that at this time would not be moving forward. In terms of study and project schedule, there is a transition that will need to take place from it being a planning exercise to a design and implementation exercise. And while it's not necessarily similar to a construction project, and it's more technology based, there's still some elements that need to take place to make this work. And of course, where we are coming still somewhat in virtual mode, still dealing with the pandemic, some of the economic forces and supply chain issues may play a factor in this timeline. So what you're looking at here is that we hope to go into the design phase in the late spring of this year, and then work our way through the end of this calendar year with a goal to have signal prioritization from a piloting standpoint in service on the Langston Boulevard corridor in the winter time. Then from there, going into calendar year 2023, we would hope to do this work on the Columbia Pike corridor. And I want to bring to attention one note. On the Columbia Pike corridor, we will be looking at 2 sections. And these are 2 sections where there won't be construction activity as a result of the Columbia Pike multimodal project. So those areas are the area that's currently finishing up its work, which is on the western end. So looking at South Jefferson Street to South Buchanan Street, and then also looking at the segment from South Monroe Street just before South Glebe Road over to South Courthouse Road, are two areas where we are aspiring to do a similar treatment in terms of transit signal priority along Columbia Pike Corridor. Now, this schedule is subject to change for a couple of reasons. One, if you go back up to the second item, equipment installation phase begins on the ART bus fleet. There's an approach that we're working to get to that place. And so we hope that we'll be able to do that. There are some regional synergies in terms of equipment that Metrobus has on their fleet that can talk to the traffic signal cameras. And if this didn't make any sense, it's a technology piece where there's going to be something on the bus talking to the traffic signal with a computer involved that will basically link up the two to show and to share, here's a bus coming, where are we in the traffic signal phase, and depending on where we are, to be able to give treatment to the bus to travel through the intersection. So that does take some equipment that would need to be assessed and installed, primarily because we are currently working on an upgrade of the real-time system on the ART bus fleet that also will bring some hopeful consistent efficiencies. I know a lot of individuals use real-time information, and what we're hoping is that this upgrade that we're doing would enhance that and also help in terms of regional synergy, in terms of being able to enhance the ability to share and show information amongst all of the service providers. Granted, Arlington Transit is not the only bus service provider in the county. So that's one piece to note. And then the other factor we will note is, based upon the approach that we're taking to secure and obtain equipment, depending on how that works, we're also hopeful that whatever approach we take does not get hung up. We do not know that at this time, but that it does not get hung up in supply chain issues in terms of computer type equipment, computer type hardware, in particular computer chips, which obviously is a big concern these days in terms of information and supply coming into the region and pretty much the country and the globe from that perspective. So that is the last slide that I have for this presentation. I will go back to the map for those of you who are wanting to see that. I do not see any hands, but if I stop presenting, I will take any questions at this time, and thank you for your time.
Great. Mr. Jones, thank you so much. Welcome to Transportation Commission, and thank you for a great presentation. I, for one, am super excited to see this here. Transit signal priority has long been a priority of the Transportation Commission. I would say, based on my understanding of past capital plans, we're about 2 years behind schedule of where we'd hoped we would be, but glad to see this finally potentially moving forward. I think my first question is, you had talked about the red dots, the places where transit signal priority is not recommended, as being places where it might do more harm than good. Can you talk a bit more about that, how that was evaluated? How are we measuring, harm versus benefit?
Sure, I'll do my best to share. I don't know if any of traffic engineering operations staff are on, but what the consultant team was looking at was more of in terms of, if you provide transit signal priority at an intersection where there's a heavy cross traffic flow. A heavy cross traffic flow is one thing where if you begin to start backing up the cross street, whereas the cross street traffic backs up to a point where it's going to take longer for cars to get through the intersection. That was one thing that was looked at in terms of the, from a traffic operations standpoint, that delay and that capacity deficit, if you will, was one of the elements in which was evaluated. In terms of the main corridor traffic, I think it was also a case of depending on where you were, if the signals, if the length of the spacing between signals became an issue, that was one piece. And I'll have to come back to you on more details, but those are the two that come to mind.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I just really hope we're looking at, comparing people to people, and not vehicles to vehicles. Because personally, if we can, save 16 people on a bus time by slowing down 4 people in cars, that's a win, even if it's 1 bus and 4 cars, and that sort of thing. So I would greatly appreciate any additional detail. I think similarly, my second question is there like a final report, like an actual PDF document that we could look through beyond this sort of high-level summary presentation that you've given us?
Sure. So that's something I'll work with the consultant team to finalize. And I think one of the things that we're hoping to do is that this is the first time we're sharing this. We didn't get a chance to share it with TAC. Sorry, Commissioner Price, we couldn't get that on the agenda. When we had our meeting earlier this month, we had a lot to discuss on that at TAC. So what we'll be working to do is establish a project website where the document will be posted. This presentation will be there as well. And I think there is some desire to communicate to a larger audience. And so we'll certainly work to get that information out to the group and then go from there as far as how we communicate it to the larger audience. So I'll make sure to work with Ms. Bridge as well as Pierre and our leadership on how to fashion that.
Fantastic, thank you. We got a bunch of other commissioners with hands up, so I'm going to jump to them next. Commissioner Lantelmi, why don't you lead us off?
Sure. First, one thing I'd like to do is recommend, if there's any way possible, to prioritize putting this in for the Langston Boulevard corridor. End to end is probably our weakest transit east-west corridor in the county, and anything we can do to encourage transit use along that corridor would really be welcomed. But my question is, do we know how this has worked where it's actually been installed? Do we have any examples of other jurisdictions that have installed this, and has it in fact been successful in both speeding up the buses and second, increasing ridership? I'll go offline while you answer.
Okay, that's a very good question. And if Mr. Holloman is here, he can back me up. I know that there's at least one that I can think of, but I don't believe I remember if it's in the district, if it's 14th Street or 16th Street. Mr. Holloman, if you're still here and you want to add to the conversation, feel free.
Sure. So it's been overall mixed results. I think what William noted earlier, the combination of other means. So if you have dedicated bus lanes, you have all-door boarding, other elements help speed up the bus a lot more than just single element of TSP. TSP is a good thing. However, it's not the only thing. And cities who have implemented just TSP have not seen, I'll say, large gains, especially in ridership. There have been small gains in terms of speeding up the buses, but after implementing the full package, you get the greatest benefit.
And I think one of the things that, just as a exposing myself here, transit nerd, the scenario New York City DOT and New York City Bus is a place that has some interesting information, and it's something that anecdotally could be checked out. Not that that could be applied here, but that's one place that I know and have seen up close. You have all three. You have the dedicated bus lane, you have signal priority, you have all-door boarding or off-board fare payment. But the one thing that you also have with that is that the service is in a limited stop form. you have local bus service, and then you have a limited stop bus service that's in the limited stop service has those elements at play. And so from that perspective, when you have all those at play, now you get to see what savings is there. You get to see how the ridership increase on that service versus its limited stop nature, where it was just limited stop. It didn't have bus only lane. It didn't have off-board fare payment. It didn't have some form of signal priority. So that's so that just gives you an idea. I won't necessarily say that if you want to say New York City is the standard. I won't speak to that because I don't want to give you that impression. But what I would say is it's a tool in the toolkit that we can use to help enhance bus service.
Thank you.
Commissioner Terry, you're up next.
Hey, Mr. Jones, thanks for presenting on this. I just have a question. I hope you can help me understand something better. And that is, when a vehicle with this technology approaches an intersection and a pedestrian is there that wants to cross the direction that would be going in front of this vehicle, how does the technology work? Sort of who wins that crossing light there?
Good question. So that's something that we have to work through in the instances that I've seen, just going back to, well, there's two things. Going back to what I've seen in New York City, if the pedestrians are crossing on the cross street, they will still win overall, meaning there's not a situation where a bus is coming and the pedestrians halfway through the intersection, and now all of a sudden they have to run across the street. But that's something that we have to look into. So as part of shifting from a planning phase to a design phase, one of the things that will be looked at is another view of the traffic signaling, traffic signal timings within the intersections, taking into account the play that's involved with pedestrians, to understand that. And as we go through the process of looking at how to implement, those are things that will have to be taken into account so that there isn't, and that we can minimize that scenario of a pedestrian on a cross street crossing the intersection, and instead of having whatever the time is today to cross the intersection, that it doesn't get reduced such that the pedestrian cannot make it across the street.
Great. Commissioner Nolan, you're up next.
Perfect. I have two questions, the first of which is similar to another scenario-based question. So curious how this technology would also interact with any of these corridors where there's applicable emergency vehicle technology preemption. And then my second question, if there was any sort of plan or potential future plan and analysis to break down any of the TSP technology for certain times of day or certain days of the week, or if it's just sort of a global sort of flip of the switch, and once this is in place for these corridors, the applicable locations, it is pervasive at all times. Thank you.
Good question, and you're welcome. In terms of interaction with emergency service vehicles will end up receiving priority. So in the instance of an emergency service vehicle, the traffic signals in the intersection will be established that in such a fashion that if an emergency service vehicle is traveling across the intersection in which signal priority is located, let's say Langston Boulevard and Arcleep Road, there's going to be some consideration, and I don't have the exact numbers on how that works, but there'll be some consideration that as an emergency service vehicle is coming to the intersection, that it would have the priority over the bus, primarily because the equipment in some respects is the same, talking to the same computer, talking to the traffic signals. So that's that one piece there. In terms of looking at the future, so originally the study was looking at having this take place during peak periods, weekday rush hour periods, because of course that's where all the heavy traffic was. Now that we're in this new phase and having virtual mode, and transit agencies across the country as well as Metro have looked at service from an all-day network perspective, meaning you kind of have a consistent level of service and frequency from 6, 7 a.m. in the morning till 7, 8 p.m. at night. That will play a factor into some of this. So there are going to be scenarios and situations where signal preemption or signal priority treatments would be applied during rush hour versus during midday, and also scenarios where this may only be applied on weekdays versus 7 days a week. So those are factors that are going to be considered, and not one scenario has been put in as of yet. Now, one thing that could happen from an all-day network perspective is that during the peak periods, the rules there may be a shift in the rules between peak and midday. So during the middle of the day, a bus may receive signal priority if the conditions are such that it's of the absolutely necessary to do that. So that's some of the elements we're looking at, and going back to the slide, this particular one that you're seeing here, these two will play a factor into how that's worked throughout the balance of a day. So not one instance is going to be applied across the entire day, where the rules for allowing that bus to have the ability to be called upon will take place throughout the course of the day. So there's some other factors involved. I hope that gives some context and wasn't too much.
No, absolutely not. That was very detailed, and I appreciate that.
Great. I do just want to give everybody a quick time check. We are still working through agenda item number 2 of 7, and we are approaching about coming up on the halfway point of the meeting. So with that said, Commissioner Raddick, why don't you go ahead?
Are any, for the stops on Columbia Pike in particular that are of the candidate stop relocated, are any of those bus stops that have been recently replaced with like the new fancy bus stop, or that will be replaced with the new nice bus stop?
I'm not sure if I understood the question. Could you repeat it, please?
Yeah, some of the, I know Columbia Pike, some of those bus stops are getting replaced with I think that they look like at the corner of, I believe right now it's Walter Reed and Columbia Pike. There are the new type of, they're very nice and they look very expensive. Are any of those that need to be relocated, even though they might have just been put in, or if they're being planned to be put in and then have to get relocated later?
No. So the work on the transit stations project, particularly in the segment from South Buchanan out to South Jefferson, those locations are what they are. And so we'll have to look at and see how those intersections line up. I would say that the work that was done in the study looked at the stop locations before the construction took place. So it's quite possible that where we have the stops, that those locations will work themselves out in terms of having a signal priority. I'll go on ahead and look at what we have here, and certainly as we go through the process and get closer, looking at how the signal and the intersections work with the stop locations will be analyzed a bit further. So.
Awesome. All right. I think that's the last hand that I seen, Mr. Jones. So just to wrap up, I will say thank you again. This was a stupendous presentation. It was great to see. And I think based on past experience, you would also find support amongst the commission for those other two pillars of speeding up transit, all-door boarding and dedicated transit lanes. So if staff has any updates on those in the future, we would heartily enjoy a presentation on anything there as well. So hope to see you again soon, and thank you very much.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, William. Next on the agenda is the Household Travel Survey Report, and staff member Eric Ballier will give an introduction for the speaker. Eric?
Yes, thank you, Bridget, and good evening, commissioners. I'm Eric Balliet. I'm acting manager for transportation research and site plan development in the Arlington County Commuter Services Bureau. My colleague Tasha Areza and I are here tonight to present the results of our latest household travel survey, which is produced by the Mobility Lab Division of Commuter Services. This report uses data from the 2017-2018 Regional Travel Survey done by the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, along with additional surveys conducted across Arlington, and it provides a comprehensive look at travel behavior in Arlington County. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Tasha, Mobility Lab's Research Director, for the presentation.
Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Tasha Areza and I'm the Research Director of Mobility Lab. So as Eric mentioned, I'm here today to talk about Mobility Lab very briefly and share with you some findings from our latest research study, which is the Arlington County Oversample and Special Analysis of the 2017-2018 Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments Regional Travel Survey. So in this presentation, I'll be referring to this report as the Household Travel Survey for short. Next slide, please. So to start things off, I'd like to give a brief intro about Mobility Lab and the work that we do. So Mobility Lab is a division of ACCS, which is the Transportation Demand Management Agency of Arlington County. Mobility Lab is a research center and communication source for transportation behavior, policy, and transportation demand management, or for short, TDM. One of our sources of funding is the Virginia DRPT. So Mobility Lab designs and conducts TDM research for Arlington County. For some of our work, we partner with established research subcontractors. We also interact with major regional TDM stakeholders, such as the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments and Commuter Connections. We also communicate the results of our research to the public and raise awareness on TDM in Arlington through our website and newsletters. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm here today to discuss some of the results and findings of our latest research, which is the Household Travel Survey. I'll begin by providing a brief background on the study and methodology of the report. Next slide, please. So what is the report about? The report uses data collected in 2017 and 2018 for the Regional Travel Survey. This Regional Travel Survey is conducted by the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. The survey is conducted every 10 years, so the last one we have is for the 2007 and 2008 period. Arlington County provided funding for an oversample. This was to collect information on additional households for the following areas of interest, which are mostly the planning corridors in the county, which is the Roslyn-Boston corridor, Columbia Pike, Shirlington, and the Route 1 corridor, which comprises the areas of Pentagon City and Crystal City. So having this oversample meant we're now able to use the data to have generalized findings from within Arlington County areas and not simply just for Arlington as a whole. So this report uses a very robust data set, which comprises a random sample of Arlington households. The dataset consists of responses from over 1,300 households, over 2,300 individuals, and over 8,000 trips as reported by the survey respondents. So what makes the Household Travel Survey unique is this travel diary component wherein each individual reports all the trips they made within an assigned 24-hour period. So basically, they are assigned a day. So this data set contains a lot of information on many topics. There are demographic characteristics both at the household level and also at the person level. So we have information on household size, reported household income, and vehicle ownership, for example. There are also very detailed information on travel and trips taken, such as for both commute and non-commute trips. There's information on the purpose for making the trip. There's also information on the location where the trip starts and ends, and also, more importantly, the mode taken for a certain trip. There's also information in the dataset on commute assistance services as it was available and used by employed Arlington residents. There's also new topics covered that reflects the changing times. For example, ride-hailing is now included as a travel mode option, but scooters were not included in the survey. Next slide, please. So I'll proceed with discussing a few key highlights from the report. Next slide, please. So the first key highlight is about demographics. Generally, the demographic data was largely stable, but I'd like to highlight some notable shifts. First, there was an increase in the share of Arlington households who report an income of $100,000 or more. In this latest report, 65% of Arlington households report this level of income, which is up from 47% previously. That was 10 years ago. Second, the share of Arlington households who are renters increased to 45%. This was only 40% in the last survey. And lastly, we are seeing a larger share of Arlington households who don't have a vehicle. 12% report being carless, which is up from 8% previously. Next slide, please. So the next key highlight I'd like to discuss is about the mode split. We see from the data that Arlington residents tend to drive alone less compared to the region, as you can see in the chart on the right. Only 35% of trips made by Arlington residents are by drive alone, compared to 60% in the region. The drive alone rate actually went down to 35% since it was at 40% previously. We can also see from the data that Arlington residents choose modes other than drive alone at higher rates compared to the region. For example, we see that walk trips comprise 22% of all trips compared to only 8% regionally. Also, we see that use of transit outpaces the regional level. Metro uses at 8% and bus uses at 2% compared to only 3% and 1% respectively for the region. Bicycle trips are also double the rate regionally at 2%. Next slide, please. So the next set of results is about trip purpose. As I mentioned earlier, the survey includes questions about very specific travel information, one of which is about trip purpose based on activity at destination. So not surprisingly, Arlington is a top destination among residents, largely because of these go-home trips. So we conducted additional analysis on this, wherein we excluded these go-home trips, and the results still showed that Arlington was still the top trip destination for Arlington residents. In fact, 53% of all trips made by Arlington residents start and end in Arlington County. We also conducted further analysis on the data to explore what were the top modes for trips were depending on trip purpose. So based on our additional analysis, these vary. For example, the results show that transit trips tend to be work or work-related trips. For drive-alone trips, these tend to be shop and errand trips, and also some work or work-related travel. Walking trips tend to be eat away from home trips, such as when people go out to eat or go to restaurants. And lastly, ride-hailing makes up 19% of trips to the airport or train or bus terminals. So this speaks of the mode choice behind the certain types of trips among Arlington residents. Next slide, please. The next highlight is about work travel. So as I mentioned earlier, the survey asks information about both commute and non-commute travel. So based on our analysis, drive alone is the top mode choice for work trips. However, we'd still like to note the shares for non-SOV modes, such as traveling to work by transit, biking, and walking. So although drive alone is a top mode choice for work trips, the level actually went down to 43%. This was 55% compared to 10 years ago. We also noted that transit use for commuting is up to 29%. This was at 27% previously. We also conducted additional analysis to explore the top work locations by mode of travel. So based on our analysis, we found out that for those who drive alone to work, they tend to drive to other areas in Virginia, such as Fairfax and Arlington. Those who use transit to go to work, the top destination is Washington, D.C. For those who walk to work, they work in Arlington, and then those who bike to work tend to work in Washington, D.C. So for this 2017 to 2018 data, only 8% reported working from home. In terms of telework, again, I'd like to point out that this is based on information collected in 2017 and 2018. 55% were eligible for telework, and of those eligible, 22% did not take any telework days. Next slide, please. So the last set of results I'd like to share is about the planning areas. So based on the data, we observed that there's a higher level of transit use and walking in Rosslyn, Ballston, and Route 1 corridors. So these are the transit corridor areas in Arlington. As we can see on the two charts on the slide, the chart on the left shows higher shares of trips made by drive alone and drive or ride with others for trips to Columbia Bike, Shirlington, and other areas in Arlington. These are the areas that are outside the transit corridor areas that I mentioned earlier. And then on the other hand, when you look at the chart on the right, we see that there are higher levels of transit use and walking for trips to the transit corridor areas of Rosslyn, Ballston, and Route 1. I'd just like to point out that Route 1 again covers the Crystal City and Pentagon City areas. Next slide, please. So this concludes the presentation. Thank you again for your time. I think we have demonstrated what type of information we can get from this very robust data set. We are able to observe any changes in demographics and also any differences in the travel behavior for Arlington County in general and from within the planning areas in Arlington. Thank you again for your time, and for more details, and if you'd like to look at the copy of the report, you can visit our website. It's shown on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see Commissioner Price's hand is up. Well, do you want to go ahead and kick us off, Commissioner Price?
Yes, definitely. Thank you. Appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. Fantastic presentation. I just want to just a quick observation. I'd love to see what the numbers are, the pre-pandemic and pandemic figures, and even post-pandemic, to see how travel patterns are being affected. So I'm so looking forward to that. I really enjoy this presentation all the time. Just one quick question was really just, why not Langston Boulevard corridor? Why wasn't that included?
I think this was based on what was defined by the county when they requested for the oversample. So I can't really speak much behind the selection for that.
It just seems like a loss of a huge travel corridor being Langston Boulevard. So just next time I would consider getting that incorporated. Thanks.
Thank you.
Commissioner Muradovic.
Yeah, thank you. The absence of Langston corridor also jumped out at me, but one kind of comment that I wanted to make in general and not related to the work that you did is it's kind of depressing to see the jump between cycling go up only from 1% to 2% in a decade. And I hope, we can do better than that. And I think that's kind of like a testament to perhaps that the current ad hoc approach of, painting bike lanes block by block or waiting for some development might not be the best way to go about things, and that we might need something bolder to get those numbers up. Once again, that has nothing to do with the work that you did. This is great to have this detail. It's amazing. There were a lot of surprises in there, and it was actually kind of fun to read. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to mention that I think there's some data that would show that cycling went up during the pandemic. So maybe in our next presentations, we're able to shed some light on that.
All right, great, thank you.
On that same note, how often does COG do this household travel survey?
Yeah, so this survey effort is only done every 10 years. Yeah, so the last one was conducted 2007, 2008, and it's only now that we have the 2017 to 2018 one. But there are other survey efforts conducted by COG that happen at a faster pace, like State of Commute, which is conducted every 3 years. But that only speaks about commute data. But still, you can get some very useful insights on how the region travels using that data set.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Ludlow, go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to associate myself with Commissioner Radovic's comments. I was shocked at how little the bike mode share increased, and would also kind of second the idea of calling for much more bold investments in the bicycle mode, getting us possibly closer to our goals. And then I also just wanted to commend Tesha and her staff on the work. I thought it was excellent. I always we need the kind of information to be able to make holistic planning decisions. One question I have for you, Tasha, is just whether there are any other data sources that you could potentially capture that would give us a little bit more regular snapshot than on a decade basis. I'm not sure if your group is using, maybe Strava. Maybe that's not the perfect set, but there are a number of other mobility data sets that are out there, often capturing movements and interpolating off of location-based services, off of phones and smart devices and other things. So just wanted to know if you'd looked at any of those things, and I think Arlington probably needs something more current than once every decade to be able to make the decisions that we need to make. Thank you.
Right. So we've done some analysis before on the cabby membership data, but that only sheds light on like the people who bike around. We also have we're also currently working on a very focused Arlington resident survey, which adds which talks about commute data, non-commute travel, and also like preferences and satisfaction for transportation services available in Arlington County, but that's also still in the works. In terms of like more regular data sources, most of the regional survey efforts are spearheaded by COG. So as I mentioned before, the ones done more regularly is the State of Commute report, but then the caveat for that, it only covers commute travel. So like how people travel to work, but at least it's, data that refreshes every 3 years. So the last one we have for that is 2019. And I believe that the next one up is for 2022. So that is in the works, and we should be seeing something like relatively sooner than later.
On a similar note, I've very much found useful in the past. Mobility Lab has done some analysis of site plans. I believe in our big residential developments and some of our maybe big office developments, we kind of force them to let us come in and study the travel patterns going into and out of the building. Do we have any more of those large group site plan transportation monitoring surveys coming out of Mobility Lab anytime soon?
Yeah, so we've had a history of assisting with the county for these data collection efforts and analysis for the building study survey. So at this point, I would have to say this is also something in the works, and I'm glad that there's interest in this.
Thank you. Yeah, I live for this data. There have been some discussion in the past. I don't think Mobility Lab has ever actually done it, but there's definite interest in seeing an intercept survey in Arlington. We often come to loggerheads with our business community, and often we feel like it's because they don't understand where their customers are coming from. Is there perhaps any movement in Mobility Lab in doing that sort of data collection? Standing outside of Clarendon restaurants and retail establishments and asking people, how did you get here today?
Yeah, so in terms of having an intercept survey, again, that we also have something lined up. It's in the works, so we'll surely note this interest for this. We'll let you know when something is available if we have any updates to it. So thanks. We're excited that this type of data set will be relevant once it's made available. Thanks.
Great. Commissioner Terry, why don't you go ahead?
Really interesting. Thank you for sharing this. And just wonder if there's a way to be able to capture how people feel safe about the way they choose to be mobile. And I'm thinking about people who may want to bike, but choose not to because they don't feel like it's a safe option. And I think being able to understand where people may feel that it's unsafe can, again, help inform the decisions and recommendations that we're making to the county board about how we plan mobility for this county moving forward. So I know this didn't capture it, but if there's a way to be able to capture those data, that'd be very interesting.
Yeah. So we have an upcoming oh wait, let me speak to this at first. So there's actually like some data available from the Greater Washington Partnership on how people feel. So this is something we can look into if you're interested in knowing more about this type of information.
All right. Last chance to raise your hand if you have any further questions. All right, seeing none, as you can see, this is your audience. This is who loves and devours your reports and your data. So we look forward to seeing you again in the future, and thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you again. We'd also be happy to be back. Thanks. Bye. Good night.
Bye. Good night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Next on the agenda, we have Dominion Energy GLUP Rebuild Project with Ann Gordon. Michael.
Hi, good evening. Hold on one moment while I get the presentation up.
Yeah.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ann Gordon Michael. I'm a communications specialist here at Dominion Energy in our electric transmission group. And I have a few other team members here this evening. Our project manager, John Kasak, Fatima Ogabade in our external affairs group, Jay Garrett, Matt Weinstein with McGuire Woods, and Ken Wagner with Draper Aiden. So here tonight to provide an update to the GLUP Rebuild Project. We attended a meeting with your commission last spring, I believe, just about a year ago. And so tonight is really just to provide an update on where we are. We're about to start construction, just to review the scope of work, and probably most interesting to your group here tonight are the impacts to 4 Mile Run Trail. So go ahead and get started. So you may be familiar, and I know Bridget sent out the link for our project video. So if you've had a chance to review it, this may look familiar, but if not, we'll go through this kind of at a high level, but we'll just focus mostly on the impacts to the trail. But if you do have any other questions at the end, feel free to ask and we can dive into more details. But just starting with the project need. So there were a few different factors into developing this project, which was approved by the Virginia State Corporation Commission in 2019. We had a special use permit expiring. Sorry, Bridget, did you? Oh, sorry about that. Okay. Special use permit was expiring in the city of Alexandria. That was recently extended until 2026. But we are planning to build a new underground line and then eventually remove the existing overhead line which will take care of that special use permit issue because we will remove our Potomac Yard transition station from service at the end of the project. Also, we have some aging equipment at our GLUP substation that's located on South Eads Street. You may be familiar, it's right next to 4 Mile Run Trail. So we will be converting the existing equipment to a newer technology. The existing equipment is air insulated equipment, and we'll be replacing it with gas insulated equipment. We also call that GIS, and that will allow us to create more room for the new underground lines, and it's better technology, and it will allow us to keep operating with reliable energy in the area. So just to kind of review for the need, will be one, converting the existing substation, which you see over here kind of on the left side of this picture here. This is actually a screenshot of our project video up on our website. And also, we will be constructing a new underground line, which you'll see here in this yellow dotted line. It goes from the GLUP substation over to Potomac Yard Shopping Center in the city of Alexandria. Then we will remove the existing overhead line from service, which you see right here, and that runs over to where our Potomac Yard transition station is located and will eventually be removed. So there will be a few impacts to the area. Most importantly, there will be impacts to 4 Mile Run Trail, but also on the city of Alexandria side, there will be a big launch pit for our microtunneling operations to install the new underground line. So we did want to focus on the impacts to 4 Mile Run Trail with you all tonight. So in 2021, we presented an option for a detour. This was because we have so much going on outside the substation and with the microtunneling. We knew at some points during the project we would have to close the trail right around where the substation is located. We weren't exactly sure how long that would be and when. As we got closer to finalizing engineering, we discovered that it would be very challenging to keep opening and closing the trail around that area. So we initially presented this plan that you see here to Arlington County. And we basically said that we would need to close this for 4 years, which was not received well. So we took that feedback and really learned how important this trail is. And we worked together with Arlington County to come up with what we think is a really good plan. It's a big improvement. And hopefully you all will see that as well in just the next few slides. But what we're calling this new plan is the temporary boardwalk diversion. And it is a very short detour that allows us to continue working on the project without having to worry about reopening and closing and all of the communication that's involved with that, and just making sure that everyone is safe when they're passing by the substation, and that our crews can focus on completing the project on time, which is very important. So this new boardwalk detour reduces the duration of a longer detour from 4 years to about 10 months. And those 10 months would be split into 2 different parts. So basically the only 2 pieces where we would need to use a longer detour would be when we install the boardwalk, which we're hoping to do this summer, would take about 4 months. And then at the end of the project in 2025, when we remove the boardwalk and overhead line from service. So that would be about 6 months. So just kind of summarizing what those closures would mean. We're hoping that we can get the approvals to go ahead and start the boardwalk installation in May, which is coming up soon. So we wanted to make sure that we were able to present this to you all before we start the project. But we're hoping that this would take only 4 months, And while we're closing it, we would like to also perform some overhead line work so we can kind of take care of both of those items at the same time to minimize impacts to trail users. So then once the boardwalk is installed, we would have about 2.5 years where that would be in place and there would be no other impacts to the trail. And then at the end of the project, we would need to remove that and then remove the overhead line work. We would not be able to have anyone traveling under the overhead line while we're performing that work anyway. So it kind of works out to do that at the same time. But now moving on to some of the plans, I'm sure you're curious to know what the boardwalk may look like. I'll start here with just an overview of what you're looking at. On the right is our GLUP substation, and the blue line would be kind of where that boardwalk diversion is. So you can really see how close the trail is to our substation and how we really need every inch we can get in the substation. You'll also see these two lines here where the micro tunneling path will be and then the receiving pit. But really, this is just to show there's a lot going on at the substation. It's not just installing the new underground line. We have a lot of work that will be taking place in the substation. And it's just good to have as much space as we can and keep the traffic moving and just get everything out of the way so that everyone can remain safe. So we're pretty pleased. Again, this was initially 4 years is what we thought we would have to do. And to reduce that almost 80% is pretty good. Here's just another image that shows kind of where the boardwalk will be. And I'll also let my colleague Ken Wagner talk about this because he helped us put this together and submit some of our MOT plans. So Ken, if you want to elaborate on any of the details here in your plan.
Yes, basically this will be a boardwalk that will be right above the mean water elevation of the 4 Mile Run, and it will be directly adjacent to the asphalt trail. The asphalt trail is in this area right here, and then we have the boardwalk, and then we have a smooth transition of asphalt that sort of ties in the boardwalk, and that sort of gives really the construction sort of the elbow room that it needs when they're doing the launch pit and the big GIS building that will be in the substation area. The next slide, if you want to, is sort of like the cross section of how it is. So basically, if you're familiar with the area, you can see we are just sitting right outside the gabion wall on the riprap bank. And you can see we have a good distance from the water elevation, and we've worked with floodway folks in the area and have they've studied this against the new and adjusted floodplains in the area, and we are still in below that elevation. So we should be in good shape during those times. That's all I had.
Ken. Thank you. So this next slide shows just an example of something similar. This is not exact, but just picture this with railings on both sides. And here's some of the quick facts over here, but most importantly, the boardwalk will closely match the existing grade of the trail and will make it as easy to enter and exit the boardwalk as possible. So just a quick overview of the MOT plan that I mentioned that Ken has been helping us on. So part of this plan that we submitted, the boardwalk plan to Arlington County, we needed to include a backup longer detour while we're installing the boardwalk. And so we have worked with Arlington County to improve our initial proposal that I shared a few slides back. And so the plan that you see here is what we have submitted. However, we heard some feedback from Arlington County about some safety concerns that trail users may want to go up Richmond Highway and Glebe Road and then come back on Eid Street. And because the sidewalk is not really wide enough for that, it could be a safety concern if folks are doing that without an actual trail or official detour there. So we have actually submitted a request for a traffic study to see what that may look like and if there would be a possibility of making the detour up this area, which I'll show on the next slide. And basically have another lane that would allow bike users to be able to come up Richmond Highway, Glebe, and then Eid Street. And on the right here is basically just showing how narrow this is along Glebe Road and how we have distribution poles that are in the middle. So if someone were to take their bike and try to ride along here, that could be very dangerous. So here's just another quick overview of the other alternative detour that we are looking into. And if we do receive approval before May, then we will move forward with this plan. However, our plan that we have submitted is this plan here, a little bit longer, but still an improvement to the initial plan that we presented. Ken, did you have anything additional that you wanted to add on this plan before I keep going?
I wanted to just describe it that basically what we looked at was basically closing the one lane on Glebe Road and one lane on Richmond Highway in the area that has sort of the yellow dash and the arrows on, and that would be barricaded off. And basically we've reached out to get a traffic study. I would say that it's about 85% complete. They have all the numbers run, they have the signals analyzed, and now they're just looking at the data, sort of getting it to see what the impacts would be, you know, if you did take that one lane away from the vehicle traffic. And then that sort of gives VDOT the ability to look at that to see if that is a safe and good use and does not inhibit the traffic that moves through the area. And really the reason for the more recent traffic numbers is because of we are in the COVID conditions.
So which one relates to this slide? Ready? Slide 20. Okay. I'll just add to my notes. It's easy enough.
And really, we have that study sort of, like I said, 85% complete. But at the same time, we also took the long detour crosses the Mount Vernon Bridge, and we also looked at the traffic on Mount Vernon to see if, you know, it could be done there also, possibly taking one of the northbound lanes off of Mount Vernon Boulevard and see what that does to the traffic to see if that is also a viable option. Currently, there is sidewalk there for bikes to use, but of course it would be using it with pedestrians in that little jaunt across 4 Mile Run. And we just wanted to see what all our options were. So that's all I had to add to that conversation. Thanks, Ann.
Thank you, Ken. So just to clarify, we're still moving forward with the plan that we submitted, but also trying to get all the data that we need over to VDOT to see if they will consider this shorter detour. So while we don't know which option it will be yet, we recognize that there's not a ton of time until we need to make a decision and just move forward and begin the project. So we wanted to make sure that everyone was kind of aware of both of the options. Whichever one we land on, we will let you know as soon as we know. But just wanted to kind of wrap up with a high-level timeline. So right now we're kind of preparing the bid process. We're really ramping up to do some community outreach before we begin construction. And we do have a community meeting scheduled for May 4th, which I'll share on the next slide if you're interested in joining. But I highlighted in orange the 2 times that the boardwalk would be installed and removed, or we would need the longer detour. The rest of the project will really just continue to move forward, and trail users should not really be impacted too much while using the boardwalk. And then at the end, once we complete all the construction, we begin restoring the work areas to their pre-existing conditions. And really the view shed will be improved with the removal of the overhead lines. And with the new GIS equipment, we will have a significant amount of equipment that will be removed. So I think you will all be pleased with the final product once this is finished. It's a few years, but it's a very big project. So if you do have more questions and you want to learn more at our community meeting, this will be available to dial into from our website, dominionenergy.com/GLEAB. We'll also record the meeting if you're unable to make it. We also have, as I mentioned before, our video that shows exactly how we'll be constructing the project. So if you hadn't had a chance to take a look at that, I think you'll find that very interesting to see how microtunneling is performed. But essentially the meeting will cover what we talked about tonight, but just go into a little bit more detail on the microtunneling and some of the activities, both on the Arlington side, but also City of Alexandria. So that really wraps up what I have. Anyone else on the project team want to chime in with anything I may have missed? Or do we want to just open it up for questions?
All right, hearing nothing else from your team, I'm gonna assume we can jump into questions or comments here. Thanks for the update. This is much better than the 4-year closure plan. Really appreciate the work that the team has done. The longer detour is kind of a known one. I feel like we've had some closures on this portion of the 4-mile run trail before and had to go over to the Alexandria side, so it's not unknown. It's not really a big deal for bikes. It's a bit more of a big deal for a pedestrian trying to get through there. So I think the boardwalk would be kind of a big improvement there. Would love to see the shorter detour go through. I think it's the morally correct way to kind of provide as direct as possible a detour, especially if it's just going to be for 10 months while the boardwalk gets put in and out or whatever. Yeah, great to see. I will say, I think I kind of have a question. I know we're having some issues with the Mount Vernon Avenue Bridge. It's slowly decaying and falling apart as the West Glebe Road Bridge is. And we've had some potential closures there. If that's going to be a big part of the detour plan, we need to make sure that that's going to be able to do the work we need it to do. And I will say we have that sidewalk on the Mount Vernon Avenue Bridge is tight, and we've put Jersey barriers, I think, in the past to sort of make it feel a little less exposed when you're biking across that sidewalk. So that might be something that's an option here as well.
Yes, I believe we have heard some feedback about creating some type of barrier if that is indeed what we end up moving forward with. Whatever helps people feeling comfortable while they're biking, I think we would be open to that. But we have heard about the project on the bridge, so that is something that we've been considering too. So ultimately, I think it will just depend on the data that we receive from the traffic study. But we really want to find something that is, livable for trail users. We know that this is important, and luckily, it's only a few months at a time. So, the worst case, I think that we have improved the plan, and just moving forward with the project is important for us, and it's our obligation to meet our deadline to the Virginia State Corporation Commission.
Great. Commissioner Lantelmi, you're up next.
Yeah, the only thing I disagree with Chair Slat about is that the Mount Vernon Bridge isn't slowly deteriorating, it's rapidly deteriorating. So we really need to have a backup to the backup. That initially, the coming few months, fine, but 4 years from now, I'm not so sure. So we really have to have a second detour ready to go if the Mount Vernon Bridge ends up being just completely closed. My only comment. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that our project team would agree with me if we are to move forward with the plan that we've submitted in our MOT, and if plans change or something happens with the bridge, for the second closure in 2025, we have time to work on that plan if that is needed. So we're it doesn't have to be set in stone. We can work through some of those things as well.
And actually, we had worked with the folks that were working on the bridge, and it seems like the repairs are being done in between our two closures. So we have sort of timed our use of that area to the closing and rebuilding of that bridge. So one day at that.
Great. Commissioner Muradovic, go ahead.
All right. Hi, thank you. I wanted to ask about, is there any possibility that, we could potentially have the boardwalk and still maintain a little bit of access on Southeast Street? This is like a route that I don't want to make this about myself, but this is a route that I know quite well because I bike it pretty much every day, and I cut into Pentagon City and Crystal City on that. And about last week, there were Old Dominion trucks out there completely blocking that route, and I kind of panicked. I thought this was beginning earlier than anticipated, and then they were there another day, but they left a little space and cones for bikes to get by. It doesn't require a lot of space. I mean, I know you're going to have heavy equipment out there and a lot of concerns, but whether it be possible to just no matter what scenario works out, to have a little bit of space dedicated for bikes and joggers, or something like 6 feet. I mean, whatever for people to get through on Southeast.
So are you talking about kind of right where this arrow is going?
Correct. Yeah. So turning off from that trail.
I can address that.
All right.
Yes, I can address that. Part of our plan is to keep even a through roadway in that area, because we are also keeping access to the wastewater treatment plant, down Southeast Street, and we are leaving access there and enough pavement that is supposed to be open at all times to keep that bikeway open. So you can do that. And it should be maintained the whole length of the job. And the closure that you experienced last week was sort of an anomaly because they had a tension wire come loose, and that's why they had to sort of protect that area a little more.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, because a couple of days after that, there wasn't a closure, but the crews were still out there. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Awesome. Can you talk, what's the decking surface going to be like of the boardwalk? Is it planned to just be bare wood?
It is. Yes.
All
but
right.
it will
I
be
will just,
wide enough, that you have clear zone on both sides,
yeah, I was
from
really
the
impressed to
designated
see that.
bikeway.
Yeah, it's really great to see that like 3-foot clear, like kind of buffer between the handrails and whatnot. I will just say we have experience with boardwalk sections of the Mount Vernon Trail being dangerously slippery in the rain when it's just bare wood. So would love it if you could explore whether there was a kind of a roughened paint or some other sort of treatment that could be put on the bare wood to make sure that it's sufficiently grippy when wet. Yeah, there's a section of the Mount Vernon Trail boardwalk that is notoriously known as the Trollheim in the bike community because so many people have crashed there due to the slipperiness when it's wet.
We can look into that. And also, I know there was consideration for, possibly composite too, but we'll check into that. Thank you.
All right, seeing no other hands, I thank you for your time and look forward to progress here on this project.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. So next on the agenda, we have 2 taxi items. They are separate action items, but our presenter, Angie De La Barrera, will present them together. And then after that, so present one and then the other, we'll hear the speaker comments since some of them wanted to speak on both. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, everyone. Can you see my presentation?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, great. Good evening. Thank you so much, Bridget. Good evening, commissioners. I'm Angie De La Barrera from Department of Transportation, and here with me is Detective Tuomi from the HAC office and the police department. I'm here to present a temporary $1 surcharge per trip for 6 months. This temporary surcharge is under section 25.1-16G, adjustments and rates of fare under the taxi cab ordinance. The taxi cab industry is requesting a temporary $1 surcharge per trip for 6 months, starting June 1st, 2022, to help alleviate gas prices. County board approval is required for this action. As some of you know, the taxi cab industry rates of fare analysis happens on a biennial basis. The next fare rate analysis will be next year. Last fare rate increase happened in January 2016, and since then the drop has been $3, and the per mile is $2.16. Here's a 12-month average gas prices for the Washington area region from gasbody.com and dated March 14, 2022, where the price was $4.49. As you can see, there was a huge spike since the end of February due to the global unrest, but also to point out that the increase started happening since for the past year. In other words, comparing March 14 prices of $4.49 in the DC region, prices of gas have climbed over 3 months, 6 months, and a whole year over $1 each time. So the county manager is recommending a temporary $1 surcharge per trip under Chapter 25.1 of the Arlington County Code, 25.1-16G. There will be fiscal impacts to the surcharge. The START program that transports people with disabilities could see an additional $23,000 in expenses. DHS and DPR departments, the Department of Human Services and the Department of Parks and Recs, use taxi cabs to transport clients to schools, visitations, enrichment programs, job training, and medical appointments. The departments estimate a cost of $14,000 in additional expenses due to the surcharge for 6 months. Arlington Public Schools uses transit to transport kids with disabilities that might not be able to ride a regular school bus and needs door-to-door service. APS estimates an increase of almost $17,000 in cost due to the surcharge. And this concludes the first presentation. Let me jump to the next one. All right, so again, Angie and Detective Tuomi. I'm here to present a proposed amendment to the county's taxi cab ordinance regarding the age of the taxi cab vehicles. And presentation mode. For background, this proposed change is under section 25.1-20 of the county code relating to the age of taxi cab vehicles. The current code states that vehicles have to be retired once they hit 10 model years. The industry is requesting an extension to 12 years. Nearby jurisdictions are also in the 10 years for most of them, but comparing to TNC requirements for Virginia that are posted on their websites, Uber requires 15 years or newer, and Lyft requires 16 years or newer. Arlington County has 477 vehicles authorized to operate through 6 certificate holders. Just for reference, in 2017, there were 847 authorized vehicles to operate. So since then, the number of taxi cab vehicles has declined due mainly to the cost to operate and TNC competition. County manager is recommending an increase in the years of service from 10 to 12 for gasoline-only powered non-wheelchair vehicles, 10 to 15 years for wheelchair-accessible vehicles, and 10 to 15 years for hybrid, plug-in hybrids, and or electric vehicles. The reason why we're doing this, hope to attract drivers by leveling the playing field with TNCs, the transportation network companies, Uber and Lyft. The proposal will give incentives to consider purchasing a wheelchair vehicle and assist people with disabilities increase access to rides. Also provides an incentive to purchase hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and or electric vehicles to achieve environmental goals. All vehicles in Virginia have to pass a safety and emissions inspection. Taxi cabs have to keep all inspections and maintenance records for 3 years to have make available for review by the HAC office or police at any time. In addition, and unlike TNCs, the HAC office can request to inspect a taxi cab at any time at his request. Detective Tuomi can reject vehicles if they're not safe. And also, unlike TNCs, the taxi cab ordinance has in its code that a vehicle needs to pass a safety inspection 60 days prior to placing this vehicle into service, guaranteeing that the vehicle is safe for the public. There are no fiscal impacts for this recommendation. And this concludes my 2 presentations.
Thank you. Thank you, Angie. So we have 3 registered speakers on these items. The first speaker is Daryl Collins, and you have 3 minutes to speak. Is Daryl on the call?
I don't see him listed.
Okay. Well, I'll come back to him possibly. Next, we have Marguerite Reed Gooden with Crown Cab Company, and you have 5 minutes to speak. Up to 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you very much. To the commissioners, my name is Marguerite Reed Gooden, and I'm speaking on behalf of my 90-year-old dad, Hartman Reed, who is the owner of Crown Cab Company, which is one of the 2 minority-owned cab companies in Arlington. Also, we're one of the smallest cab companies in Arlington. 90% of our cabs and our owner drivers work out of the airport, as we do not have acquisition to some of the county, access to the county and the school options. So we are wholeheartedly supporting the proposal to apply the temporary $1 gas surcharge and to extend the street life of the gas-powered vehicles, cabs, to 12 years and the hybrid and wheelchair access cabs to 15 years. Our owner drivers have endured an extreme financial challenges since the COVID shutdown in March of 2020. After 18 months practically having no income from taxi service, they returned to service only to be challenged with extraordinarily high gas prices and a dramatic increase in the cost of living. Our taxi industry as a whole has been ravaged by the unregulated Uber Lyft rideshare businesses. Surprisingly, Uber and Lyft, they have been charging substantially higher rates to the public, but the public still continues to pay. Our taxis offer a safer, vetted ride, but regulated fares limit income opportunities. The minimal surcharge would give some relief to our owner drivers. We recognize our Crown owners as essential workers in the Arlington transportation service industry, and They deserve to be fairly compensated for their service. Providing opportunities to keep their vehicles longer will also help during this recovery period. The current national economic struggles have added another devastating challenge to our taxi industry. The cost of new vehicles has increased exponentially, and the availability of used vehicles has greatly diminished. Therefore, extending the years for the use of our vehicles will definitely provide some relief. Lastly, my dad acquired Crown Cab in 1974, and he was a driver then. He wanted the company to be a company that provided opportunities for people to make a living. That mission remains today. Although our company has incurred losses, his priority has been to help our owner drivers prosper and add great service to people of Arlington County. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Charles King with the Red Top Cab.
Well, let's see. Can you hear me and see me?
Sure can.
Oh, good. Thank you. With me, the technology is a 50-50 shot at best. I am Charlie King. I'm with Red Top and its affiliate Arlington Yellow Cab Company. And I'm here tonight in particular on behalf of our outstanding drivers. I emphasize that because for those commissioners who may not be fully aware of our business model, the increased cost of gasoline falls strictly on the drivers because gasoline, whether the vehicle is owned by the driver or the company, is under our business model a driver expense. I think the staff report well illustrated the impact that these drivers are feeling, and we strongly urge the approval of the $1 per trip surcharge in order to offset that cost. It's important for me probably to note that that surcharge is intended for the drivers. It goes in their pockets. It's not shared with the company in any way. But it's critically important to these struggling drivers. In terms of the vehicle age amendment, we also support that. I can speak a little more authoritatively on the question of the lifespan and the maintenance of the vehicles, because our company does own a significant portion of its vehicles, about 50% company owned, 50% driver owned at this point. We've seen since the age of vehicles was increased from a 7-year maximum to a 10-year maximum several years ago in initial response to the TNC upsurge. We continue to find vehicles as they hit or get close to the 10-year mark to still be very serviceable. That's in large part because of our outstanding preventive maintenance program. In the case of our drivers who own their vehicles, it's their tool. They take extremely good care of it. We believe that the additional age limit of 15 years for wheelchair accessible vehicles, which are very critical to a significant percentage of riders in Arlington, or hybrid, plug-in hybrid or electric, more efficient electric vehicles, is warranted by, as the previous speaker noted, the incredible increase in cost in some cases. I can tell you that on the purchasing schedule for the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, wheelchair accessible vehicles in the last 18 months have increased in cost by 35%. We can't adequately meet the needs of Arlington citizens with that sort of equipment going forward. And the cost of hybrid vehicles remains high. The cost of electric vehicles, while I think it's becoming more realistic, is still high. If drivers are going to be able to make those kinds of investments, particularly in the current economic situation where the cost of both new and used vehicles has been so dramatically inflated, we need that additional flexibility in order to be able to manage our costs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Daryl Collins with Friendly Cab. Is Friendly Cab on the call?
That's it.
That concludes our speakers. I see that they're on the call.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
perhaps it's not Daryl, but someone else from Friendly Cab.
Hi, Bridget. I just got an email from Daryl. He's having technical difficulties.
Okay, should he call
Friendly
in?
Cab.
Should he call in? I can send you the number to give him. I'll do that.
Okay.
While we wait for our speaker to call in, do any commissioners have questions for Ms. DeBarrera? Ms. DeBarrera, is staff supportive of the 6-month time frame on the gas surcharge?
Yes, we are.
You think that's an appropriate? I mean, it's hard to predict where gas prices are going to go in the future, but staff thinks that's an appropriate starting point.
Well, we can always make a new amendment if we need to go further, but actually gas prices have gone up since I shown that charge for over a year, not just through this global unrest period. So at least, let's say by tomorrow gas prices drop, but at least they had over a year where they've been paying over $1. So at least the 6 months will help them recuperate.
Great, thank you. That makes total sense. Great, thank you.
Was Mr. Collins able to call in?
Total
Mr.
sense.
Collins? Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear us?
Angie?
Yes, Sarah, we can hear you.
Sounds like he's still
I can hear you a little bit. It's break. All right, great. I mean, I've listened to Charlie, I've listened to Marguerite, and they both eloquently just spoke on behalf of Friendly Cab. We agree on this surcharge, the $1 surcharge. We also, Charlie stated that the price of the vehicles are the price of the cars are extremely high right now. This amendment is basically for the drivers themselves. Our drivers, our clients, our partners in this business have been suffering time and time again with the Uber and the Lyft, and now with the way that economic climate is in this area. I agree with Charlie and Marguerite. We need to climb on board with this amendment. The only thing that I feel that is different, that our local governments around us made it immediate consciousness to make this, apply this to the taxi industry up front. And I think we should do the same. Thank Angie, thank the board for everything that they're thinking about. and that's all I have to say. I'm having technical difficulties here, so I don't want to hold you guys too much longer.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Appreciate the call in.
Thanks a lot. All right. Discussion is now with the commission. This seems straightforward and pretty easy to me. I note from our board report that this appears to be a request to advertise. Is that correct, Ms. DeBarrera?
Yes, that's correct.
In the interests of saving everyone time and energy, would staff be okay with and or supportive of the commission going ahead and recommending both that advertisements get placed and also to go ahead and recommend its adoption at that public hearing so that you don't have to come back to Transportation Commission a second time? Great.
That works
awesome.
with me too.
Great. Then I think we will do two different motions since it was two different agenda items. So I will move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the county board authorize advertisement of a public hearing to consider a temporary $1 surcharge as outlined in our draft board report, and furthermore that the Transportation Commission recommend adoption of that $1 temporary surcharge as outlined in our draft board report.
Second.
Second.
That is moved and seconded. Is there any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, we'll go to a vote. Commissioner Brose?
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan?
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi?
Aye.
I believe Commissioner Locker had to leave. Yes. Commissioner Ludlow?
Aye.
Commissioner Moradovic?
Aye.
Commissioner Price?
Aye.
Commissioner Raddick?
Aye.
Commissioner Yeri?
Aye.
Commissioner Terry?
Aye.
And I also vote yes, so that is unanimous. And then where's my board report? I move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the county board authorize advertisement of a public hearing on proposed changes to the taxi cab ordinance relating to extension to the maximum vehicle age as outlined in our draft board report, and furthermore recommend that the Transportation Commission recommends that the county board adopt said changes to the taxi cab ordinance as outlined in our draft board report.
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion of that motion? Then we shall vote. Commissioner Brose?
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan?
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi?
Aye.
Commissioner Ludlow?
Aye.
Commissioner Moradovic?
Aye.
Commissioner Price?
Aye.
Commissioner Raddick?
Aye.
Commissioner Yeri?
Aye.
Commissioner Terry?
Aye.
And I will also vote yes, so that also passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Ms. De La Barrera. It's great to see you again, and thank you to all of our public speakers. And look forward to seeing that move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angie.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the final agenda item is the Penn Place site plan, and staff member Joanne Gabor will be leading this effort and will introduce any other speakers.
Thank you, Bridget. Again, my name is Joanne Gabor, DES. The applicant is going to present first, and then staff will have a presentation for you.
Thank you, Joanne. Good evening, everyone. I'm excited to be here tonight on behalf of Amazon to present our vision for the third phase of Amazon's HQ2 development, Penn Place. My name is Joe Chapman, and I'm Amazon's Director of Global Real Estate and Facilities for Arlington. It has been a remarkable few years since we announced our HQ2 plans in 2018 and began opening our first office in Crystal City in 2019. This slide shows the three main phases of growth In phase one, we leased and renovated over 850,000 square feet of office space in Crystal City. Phase two is our Met Park project, which consists of 2 LEED Platinum buildings, as well as 2.5 acres of new and renovated public park space, scheduled to open in 2023. And phase three is Penn Place, which includes an additional 3 LEED Platinum buildings, the unique Helix building, and generous public open spaces, along with retail, restaurants, a child care facility, and community high school. Tonight, we will share an overview of the proposed Penn Place project. Joining me tonight are John Salvo, our lead architect with NBBJ, Felice Brishta, our lead transportation consultant with Grove Slade. We started our design process by studying the existing planning on the site and Arlington's overarching planning principles. From the beginning, we found strong alignment with our own values, and we created a set of precepts that serve as guideposts and inspiration for our design team. Our vision and program for Penn Place remain grounded in these design precepts, which we're excited to share with you tonight as we walk through the Penn Place designs. Our lead architect, John Salvo from NBBJ, is now going to share more details about the Penn Place vision and architecture. Thank you for your time this evening. I'll send it over to John.
Thanks, Joe. So I'd like to start by acknowledging the long and useful legacy of urban planning related to the site. The county staff, with community input, essentially created the guideposts we used to evolve the master plan. In particular, the recent Pentagon City Plan has had consequential impacts on the Penn Place design. From the beginning, our intent for Penn Place has been to contribute to community and be seen as an integral part of the neighborhood, rather than as a separate campus. This meant making appropriate connections back into the cityscape and ensuring that the site was as welcoming to the public as the employees, which included embracing nature as part of the project story. Very early, we recognized an opportunity to break up the large block by creating new connections at Midblock, where we could align with existing streets or driveways. So we proposed new signalized intersections with pedestrian crosswalks that connect with the interior pathways of Penn Place. On the left, you see where the vehicles come into the site. 3 intersections that include vehicular entries to the underground garage. And one of those, the one from Army Navy, was a key early decision to place all loading facilities in a centralized underground location. One of the biggest benefits of this move was the ability to replace the asphalt of streets with additional landscaping and safe through-block corridors for pedestrians and multimodal devices. A few factoids about the project as it evolved. Our above-grade structures consist of 3 office towers, 3 retail pavilions of 1 or 2 stories, and the unusual Helix. The total office area is a little less than 2.77 million square feet. And the shared Helix amenity building is another 392,000 square feet, with additional square footage for retail, childcare, and more recently, the Arlington Community High School. Over the last year, our public space easement has actually grown from 2.0 to 2.75 acres, with underground parking for 1,980 cars and ample loading capability. And just to mention the sustainability that we are looking to be LEED Platinum with this project, but I'll talk a little more about sustainability later. After committing to these initial transportation improvements, we entered the LRPC, SPRC, and public space entitlement processes and began weekly reviews of the design with Arlington County staff. These engagements resulted in significant modifications and improvements to the project design. I want to share a few key examples of these changes. We added a 15-foot wide east-west multimodal path that will start the proposed green ribbon in Pentagon City. We agreed to some late changes in the location of our build-to lines on 3 of the 4 surrounding streets, which meant that we had to move or reconfigure some of our buildings, but also to accommodate, in the end, some very important improvements. New protected bike lanes on South Fern, a wider sidewalk on 12th Street and larger shy zones on some other streets, new right turn lanes on Army Navy Drive and South East Street, and protected intersections at all corners. In response to a request for a more direct north-south connection, we added a generous stair at Army Navy Drive to complement the forest walk. All four sides of the site have entries, but we think of 12th Street as the front door. We anticipate the highest volume of pedestrian traffic from metro, buses, and the surrounding neighborhood to be coming from 12th. Our intent is for the property to be welcoming to the community from all sides, but particularly at this front door. So in addition to the largest opening, Midblock and Elm Street, there are additional entry points near the intersections of 12th with Eads and with Fern that lead to the central open space through our 30-foot wide retail mews. Both Fern and Eads Streets are also considered main entry points. Looking left to right on this rendering, you'll see, for example, next to Tower 1 is an entrance into the retail mews. There is a pavilion with a green roof and a garage entrance lit by a skylight. The Eads Street Plaza between the pavilion and the helix includes the eastern terminus of the multimodal path. And the plaza is bordered by a restaurant at the base of the helix with outdoor seating under a trellis canopy. And note the ample green at the far right that lines the lower reaches of the forest walk as it winds its way to Army Navy Drive. Over the course of the entitlement process, we've added more planting across the board. We've tweaked and scaled our program spaces to balance the many community requests for the usage of the park, and modified site circulation to include more direct east-west and north-south routes. After inviting the public into the site through the multiple entry plazas and retail mews, we further encourage community engagement by providing a broad range of site programming. All of the open space elements imagined in the earlier PDSP are captured in the new plan, as well as quite a few more. And with that, to keep things moving, given the late evening, I'm going to turn over to Felice Brichta of Grove Slade to share more details about the project.
Great, thanks, John. My name is Felice Brichta, and I'm with Grove Slade. We've been working with the team on the transportation elements of the site and wanted to walk through those with you now. So this slide provides an overview of the improvements directly at the Penn Place site. There are 4 new signals, 3 of which are at the site access points, shown here in blue, significant bike and micromobility infrastructure improvements, shown here in yellow. Nearby transit improvements include the transitway along 12th Street and a relocated bus stop along South East Street, shown here in green. And the entire site will be served by a centralized below-grade loading facility, which will be accessed by a single curb cut on Army Navy Drive. Pedestrian access was the primary focus of the design. The graphic on the right shows the pedestrian access points and building entries throughout the site. There's easy, accessible pedestrian access from all corners of the site and major intersections. Building lobbies, shown here in light yellow, are located along the perimeter or front onto the park. The childcare and Arlington Community High School space in T3 both have access off of Fern Street, and there are multiple retail entrances around the site. There are several improvements to the bicycle infrastructure adjacent to the site, including the 2-way cycle track on Army Navy Drive, protected bike lanes on South Eads Street and South Fern Street, sharrows along 12th Street, a 15-foot multimodal path through the center of the site, providing east-west connectivity, and bike runnels included where there are stairs within the site. Similar to Met Park, a long-term bike parking spaces will be located at the ground level, allowing cyclists to roll directly into the indoor bike parking rooms adjacent to building lobbies. Significantly more long-term bicycle parking spaces, showers, and lockers are being provided than are required. The graphic on the right also shows the short-term bike parking areas in the yellow dots there that will be located throughout the site, with bike repair stations also proposed adjacent to the multimodal path at both Fern and Eads. Finally, there are 2 capital bike share stations currently serving the site, and an additional bike share station is proposed on Eads just south of Army Navy Drive. All 3 towers, plus the helix, retail, and community spaces will be served by a centralized below-grade loading facility, which will be accessed by a single curb cut on Army Navy Drive. The entire loading facility will be accommodated below grade and will not be visible from the street. The loading dock will accommodate 6 vans and 7 trucks, including tractor trailers. Delivery vehicles to the loading facility will be scheduled in advance, and 2 lanes are provided at the top of the ramp to allow a separate internal screening area for any unscheduled trucks, while allowing other vehicles to access the garage and loading facility unimpeded. A centralized below-grade garage will provide parking for the entire site. There will be 3 garage access points along South Fern, Army Navy Drive, and South Eads Street with a traffic signal at each. The signals will help serve the vehicular flow into and out of the garage and will also provide opportunities for signalized pedestrian crossings, particularly at Fern and Eads, where they are anticipated to be significant pedestrian volumes. The below-grade garage will be connected so that you're able to enter and exit at different access points. For example, if you enter the garage from Eads, you can exit via Fern or Army-Navy and vice versa. The gate controls are located below grade at the entrance to the parking area to minimize potential for queuing of inbound vehicles at the street level and to provide queuing space for outbound vehicles, resulting in fewer conflicts with the traffic signal operations. Pickup and drop-off parking spaces are located before the gate arms on the first level of the garage, so they can be utilized without needing to pass through parking gates. So this slide provides a comparison of the proposed pin plan place to the previously approved plan from 2013. As shown, the program has changed and the centralized loading dock and consolidated garage access points have reduced the number of curb cuts from 9 down to 3. This includes reducing the number of garage entries from 6 to 3 and loading doors from 6 doors at grade to 1 shared entry at grade. The total number of proposed parking spaces is similar between the two plans and the number of trips generated is comparable. The multimodal transportation assessment takes into account the various modes of travel to and from the site. As shown in the pie charts to the right, a 30% auto mode split was assumed for the office and Helix space, with slightly higher auto mode share assumed for the daycare and community center space. The retail component is expected to be primarily made up of walking trips. The 30% auto mode split for office is consistent with Arlington County guidance and is based on original scoping discussions for the MMTA. However, with just over 1,800 proposed parking spaces for office and an employee count of 12,500, this results in roughly 1 space per every 6 to 7 employees. The assumed mode split provides a conservative analysis for planning purposes, and the site will be in alignment with the Pentagon City Sector Plan goal of 25% auto mode split for office. A VISM analysis was prepared for the site, which is a much more robust microsimulation tool than is typically performed for MMTAs. In this case, given the multimodal nature of the site, the proximity to the transitway along 12th Street and other planned improvements underway near the site, the county requested VISM as the preferred tool to analyze the surrounding street network. The study area for the VISM analysis includes 20 intersections, as shown in the graphic on the right. The analysis identified signal timing adjustments at 9 intersections, shown in blue, modification to both signal phasing patterns and timing changes at 7 intersections, which are shown in green, and restriping at 8 intersections, shown in orange. The model also reflects the relocation of the bus stop on South Eads Street, shown in yellow, and the new bike facilities plan for Army, Navy, Fern, and Eads, which is shown with the purple line. The proposed parking ratios for the site will include an office ratio of 1 space per 1510 and a retail ratio of 1 space per 1125, which includes childcare and community uses. Consistent with Met Park, daily single occupancy vehicles will have the highest out-of-pocket commuting costs, and employees will be encouraged to use alternate modes. For example, employees will receive the monthly commuter benefit for transit, carpool will be incentivized, and vehicle parking will be free of charge, and employees will be charged for parking. Another element of the parking garage is that 7% of parking spaces will be reserved for electric vehicles and provided with charging stations. In addition to these parking-related elements that contribute to the transportation management plan, the site will also include the typical components of a TMP, such as a TMP coordinator, contributions to Arlington County Commuter Services, and working together with Arlington Transportation Partners. And finally, we'll conclude on this slide with a nice rendering of the Fern Street access. Thank you all for your time this evening, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Again, my name is Joanne Gabor with DES. My presentation has gotten shorter and shorter as the evening has gone on. I'm going to try and not repeat anything the applicant has. So what we are looking at right now is the Penn Place site plan. We are doing a PDSP amendment, a site plan amendment, and we have a couple of use permits for the Penn Place site. This will be site plan number 105-7. Specifically, we are amending site plan 105 SP7 to discontinue the hotel use. We are amending the site plan 105 PDSP, Pentagon City Phase Development Site Plan for parcel 1D. We are amending site plan 105 SP7 for the development of Penn Place. And we are approving 2 use permits, one for the public park and one for the public high school. As was indicated, the site is in Pentagon City. It is on the border of the Pentagon City Sector Plan area. and the Crystal City Sector Plan area. Each street is the delineation of this area. It actually is adjacent to 3 county projects that will be constructed at the same time. We have the Army Navy Drive Complete Street Project north of the site. We have the 12th Street Transway Project south of the site, and then we have the Eads Street Project and the new park that will be built on the east side. As the applicant did discuss, there are a multitude of transportation improvements being completed with this development, and I'm not going to repeat anything that they said. Suffice it to say, everything they said is supported by staff. I did want to talk about how this does align with the Pentagon City Sector Plan that was adopted in February. So there was a potential bike network map that is in the Pentagon City Sector Plan. I have circled the area here in red, and what you will see is the blue solid lines where planned bicycle facilities are proposed. This is on Eads Street, which the applicant is providing. You'll also see here on dashed lines on Fern Street, this is the area for potential bike facilities. And that again is something the applicant is providing on Fern Street in the north and the southbound direction. You can also see through the middle here, while we do not have any internal streets for vehicular use, we do have this 15-foot wide multimodal path that will be able to be used by bicyclists, pedestrians, and scooter users. This is not intended for high-speed bicycling, more for the slow-moving folks who want to get through the site, go somewhere to the site, since they will be mixing with the other modes. And again, we have Army Navy Drive with the bicycle facilities that are being completed along the Complete Street project. In addition, part of the Pentagon City Sector Plan is the green ribbon element. This is basically stitching together the areas through pedestrian and bicycle paths that are not for vehicles. And so again, you can see here in the green solid dots is where the green ribbon wants to be. So it is that east-west path, that 15-foot wide path that we were just referring to through the site. You can also see we have the smaller dots here that go south to where 12th Street and Elm Street intersect. And then also we have the dots here all the way up to Army Navy Drive. So while we do not have those internal streets for vehicles, we do have an east-west, north-south connection for all the active transportation users. And we do have the runnels on the staircases on that northern portion, in addition to the ramping. So everyone can use everyone can access Army Navy Drive if they want to use the ramp, if they want to use the stair, or they want to use the runnel. Other proposed features, again, the applicant mentioned, and I'm just going to touch on, is the build out and conveyance of the community facility, the Arlington Community High School. They are designing, building, and maintaining the approximately 2.75 acre public park. They are doing contributions to affordable housing. The child care center will be available to the general public. Transportation improvements, as we have discussed, public art funding, contribution or on-site public art, and sustainable design elements. There are some zoning modifications they are requesting. So we have the exclusions for gross floor area, for below grade storage, air shafts, area open to below. The parking ratio, as was discussed, the penthouse screening height and height of the solar arrays. The permitted maximum is 23, and they're going all the way up to 42 feet. And this is related to the height of some of the mechanical overruns, and also the solar arrays that are on the roofs of all 3 of the towers. The driveway aprons are slightly larger than 30 feet. This is due to some of the driveways trying to accommodate that traffic, and also the loading vehicles. Trying to get some of those large trucks to turn into the site is requiring us to have slightly larger driveway widths, but we will have the detectable warning strips. We will have some of the speed bumps. So we will have those safety measures in place to make sure that pedestrians and the motor vehicles interact safely. And then there's also approximately 1.7 million square feet additional density based on the sustainable design elements, affordable housing, public open space improvements, maintenance, and other similar components. So the public review process, it did start in March 25th of 2021. We had a public community kickoff meeting. We then had 3 virtual LRPC meetings. We had 2 park planning online engagements. And then we had 3 SPRC meetings and 1 online engagement that did coincide with a walking tour of the site. We are currently in March, April, where we're doing commission meetings with anticipated of the county board in April 23rd of 2022. We are going to a large number of commissions We went to the Disabilities Advisory Commission in February, Parks and Recreation Commission, Forestry and Natural Resources Commission mid-March. We went to C2E2 earlier this evening. Here we are at Transportation Commission. We are going to Planning Commission next Monday night. Then we have the Citizens Advisory Commission on Housing on the 14th, and then the County Board meeting on April 23rd. With that, staff does support the project and recommends approval with the attached conditions. You will note and probably notice that there are some conditions that we're still finalizing, but they are pretty minor things that we just need to coordinate with the applicant. So generally speaking, the conditions are in their final state in terms of transportation. I do have a lot of backup slides, so if you have any questions, I am here to answer. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Ms. Obakoya, I know one of our public speakers was not able to stick around this late, but we have their presentation. Remind me, were there any other public speakers on this item?
She was the only public speaker.
All right, well then here we go for the commission. So commissioners, if you have questions or comments, go ahead and raise your hand as usual. Commissioner Buck started this process for the commission, and then when he resigned, I took over. Commissioner Muradovic has been involved as well. He was Darren's number 2 and has been helping me out here. In general, I think it's a great project. There's a huge amount for biking in the area. It does going to be a great pedestrian experience all the way around and all the way through. The applicants made some great improvements in north-south pedestrian connectivity. I think the stairs are a big improvement. I think the biggest transportation controversy towards the end of there was 12th Street and whether it also needed dedicated bike facilities. I find myself fairly well convinced by staff's reasoning on why they're not there, and we can jump back into that if need be, but I think it was talked through pretty well the last time this was at Transportation Commission. So I'm prepared to support it and to see it move forward, and looking forward to seeing the on-the-ground improvements. Commissioner Terry, why don't you go ahead and kick things off with a discussion?
So I just have a question about the issue that would have been raised by the speaker, and I'm wondering if somebody could just talk to me about what does bonus density mean?
I believe the speaker was Anne. Is that correct, Bridget?
Yeah, she sent us a whole presentation from Arlingtonians for a Sustainable whatever about community benefits and whether the county is getting enough for the bonus density that's being provided.
So I will be the first to admit this is something that is discussed a lot more. Planning Commission, Transportation Commission doesn't usually get into the bonus density community benefit calculations, but the short version is based on the zoning of the site. There is an associated density that the site is allowed to have by right. And then if the applicant wants to propose additional density above that number, then there are certain mechanisms to achieve that bonus density. And so there is some calculations and formulations that go into that in different pathways. So it could be affordable housing, it could be sustainable design elements through the Green Building Bonus Density Incentive Program, it could be off-site transportation improvements or open space improvements, and those each have a value to them. And through discussions with the applicant and staff, we come up with an appropriate package that balances all that based on county policies and goals. And so one of Anne's concerns is whether or not that bonus density valuation, if you will, is appropriate, is the short answer.
And what is your take on that?
So we've seen the presentation. We actually saw it at C2E2 earlier this evening, so I'm very familiar with it because we saw it a couple hours ago. That generally staff feels comfortable with the bonus density and the mechanisms that are proposed with the application. We have seen Anne's presentation, and at this point, we are comfortable with what is being proposed to achieve the density.
On that note, do you happen to have a backup slide on community benefit that walks through what the expectation is at this point? By any chance?
I will tell you what I do have, which is I do not have the specific numbers. It's not something that we had finalized when the Transportation Commission report came out yet. I know when it goes to Planning Commission, I believe they will have finalized. But generally, it's encompassed to these elements. So we have the community facility that will be the Arlington Community High School. If you all aren't familiar with the Arlington Community High School, it is an alternative high school that does serve individuals that maybe need a non-traditional school day. Maybe they're older, they might be supporting their family or working there the day. You have to be a minimum of 16 years old, but there is no upper age limit. They offer classes during the day and at night to achieve your high school diploma or high school equivalency. And it's something that this Arlington Community High School has been around for a long time. It does serve about 300 students and it's never had a real home. Right now it's currently at the Career Center on Walter Reed, and this will be its home for the next 30 years, which is something that I know we're very proud of. And I know Amazon as well is very excited to be supportive of this element. So that is one of the big community benefits. They are going to be designing, maintaining the 2.75 acre public space in the middle. They are going to do a contribution to affordable housing. And then there's the public art fund contribution, and then sustainable design elements. They are going to be doing LEED Platinum, and it's probably the most sustainable building that is going to go forward at this point. They are achieving the FAR bonus density of 0.55 under the new Green Building Density Incentive Program.
Awesome, thank you. And hopefully that's helpful to Commissioner Terry as well. Commissioner Brose, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman Slett. Just wanted to recognize we had quite a bit of conversation about this proposal at our previous meeting, and just happy to see a lot of the incorporated changes and the team responding to that. I think Amazon must have known coming into Arlington that we had this Arlington Way, and they were going to get a lot of interaction with the public in terms of the plan they were putting forward. But I think they've been working with us and listening. So I think that's what the plan reflects, and especially all the green space and the walkways and accommodations for transportation, I think are what we were looking for. So just want to give my thumbs up to it, the proposal.
Great. Anyone else? All right, seeing no other hands, I'm going to take a stab at this monster motion. I move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the county board adopt the SP number 105 SP7 site plan amendment to discontinue a site plan for a hotel, to adopt the SP number 105 phased development site plan amendment to amend the Pentagon City PDSP for parcel 1D, to adopt the SP number 105 SP7 site plan amendment for the block known as Penn Place to construct 3 22-story office buildings, 1 office building that's approximately 355 feet in height, and 3 buildings of up to 2 stories, and to approve the use permit for a public park and use permit for a high school with a design capacity of 300 students, as outlined in our draft board report dated March 24th, 2022.
Second.
Oh, thank goodness. I was afraid nobody was going to second there for a minute. I was going to have to say it all again.
You're good.
All right. Is there any discussion of the motion? I feel like this speaks well to the process that we've gotten here to the end and are not having a long, drawn-out discussion. So bravo to everyone involved. Seeing no hands, we will go ahead and take this to a vote. Commissioner Brose.
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan.
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Aye.
Commissioner Locker. Oh, she left. She had to leave early. Commissioner Ludlow.
Aye.
Commissioner Maradovic.
Aye.
Commissioner Price.
Aye.
Commissioner Raddick.
Aye.
Commissioner Yeri.
Aye.
Commissioner Terry.
Aye.
And I also vote yes. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much to the applicant. Thank you very much to staff. And I look forward to seeing some of these public space improvements on the ground.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne and the team. Appreciate it. And that concludes our agenda items for the night. Any other business we should discuss? Okay, hearing none, our next meeting is Thursday, April 28th.
All right, thanks everybody. See you all then.
All right.
Bye for now.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.